Have you ever watched someone freeze because their lies betrayed them in front of thousands? I watched from backstage as my biological parents sat in VIP seats, waiting to claim a success they threw away when I was 13. They think I am here for their approval, but they are wrong. Today is not about reconciliation. It is about balancing the ledger they opened the day they left me to die alone in a hospital room. My name is Ren Parker, and for the last decade of my life, I have been waiting for this exact moment. Though not for the reasons everyone else in this gymnasium believes. The air inside the university arena was thick enough to choke on. A humid blend of industrial floor wax, cheap perfume, and the nervous sweat of 3,000 graduating students. From my position behind the heavy velvet curtains of the backstage wing, the roar of the crowd sounded like distant ocean surf, a constant, rolling thunder of applause and cheering families. Most of my classmates were bouncing on the balls of their feet, adjusting their tassels, or frantically checking their teeth in selfie cameras. They were vibrating with the kind of pure, unadulterated hope that comes from believing the world is waiting to embrace you. I was not bouncing. I was standing perfectly still. My hands were hidden inside the billowing sleeves of my dark ceremonial gown. My right thumb traced the circumference of the silver ring on my left hand. Over and over again, it was a cheap thing, tarnished in the grooves, worth maybe $20 at a pawn shop. But it was the only thing I owned that felt heavy enough to keep me tethered to the ground. Talia had given it to me when I was 14. The day the adoption papers were finalized, she had told me it was a shield. Today, it felt more like a weapon I was about to unsheathe. A headset-wearing stage coordinator, a woman named Sarah, who had been sprinting around with a clipboard since 6 a.m, appeared at my elbow. She looked frazzled, her hair escaping its bun in wisps of stress. She leaned in close, lowering her voice so the valedictorian standing 5 feet away would not hear. "Ren," she whispered, her eyes darting between me and the tablet in her hand. "I have a weird situation. Security just radioed up from the main entrance. There are 2 people at the check-in desk. They are claiming to be your parents." The world seemed to stop spinning for a fraction of a second. The noise of the crowd did not fade, but it suddenly felt like it was happening behind a thick sheet of glass. I kept my face neutral, a skill I had perfected in sterile hospital rooms and social worker offices years ago. "Is that so?" I asked, my voice steady. "They are making a bit of a scene," Sarah continued, looking apologetic. "They said there must be a mistake with the seating chart. They insist that as the parents of the guest speaker and integrity medalist, they should be in the reserved VIP section, not general admission. They want access to the front row." I looked down at the digital seating chart glowing on her tablet screen. Sarah scrolled down to the addendum list. There they were, 2 names I had not spoken aloud in nearly 10 years. Seeing them typed out in black pixels against a white background felt surreal, like seeing the names of 2 characters from a horror movie I watched as a child. I did not shake. I did not feel the sudden spike of adrenaline or the hollow pit of fear that used to consume me when I was a teenager. Instead, a wave of absolute liquid nitrogen cold washed through my veins. It was a clarifying sensation. It sharpened my vision and slowed my heart rate. "Let them in," I said. Sarah blinked, surprised. "Are you sure? We can have security escort them out if they are crashing. We have protocols for estranged family members. Ren, you do not have to deal with this." "No," I said, and I turned to look her directly in the eyes. "Give them the seats. Put them in the front row, right in the center. I want them to have the best view in the house." Sarah hesitated, sensing something under the surface of my request, but she was too busy to argue. She tapped her screen, authorized the upgrade, and rushed off to deal with a missing microphone stand. I turned back to the curtain, finding a small gap in the fabric to peer out at the arena. The VIP section was filling up with donors, faculty members, and the proud parents of the top 1%. I scanned the rows until I found the usher leading 2 people to the reserved seats near the center aisle. There they were, My biological mother was wearing a dress that was slightly too formal for a morning ceremony, a shimmering shade of navy blue. Her hair was dyed a rich chestnut brown, styled in stiff curls that would not move in a gale. She was clutching the glossy program to her chest like it was a holy text, her knuckles white. She looked well preserved, the kind of woman who spent a fortune on skincare to hide the bitterness etched around her mouth. Beside her sat my biological father. He looked older than I remembered, his hairline receding, but his eyes were the same. He was not looking at the stage. He was looking at his phone, typing furiously, probably checking stock prices or calculating the potential networking value of the next 2 hours. He looked like a man who was already counting money he had not yet earned. They looked respectable. They looked successful. They looked like loving parents who had arrived to celebrate their daughter's triumph. A memory, sharp and jagged as a piece of broken glass, sliced through my mind. I was back in that hospital room, the smell of antiseptic and dying flowers. The hum of the monitors. I was 13 years old, bald from the first round of chemo, shrinking into the pillows because I felt like a burden just by existing. I heard my mother's voice, not the soft coo she was likely using right now to charm the person in the seat next to her, but the harsh whisper she had used when she thought I was asleep. We cannot drain our savings for this. David, think about Blair. Do not ruin your sister's future for a lost cause. A lost cause. That was what I was to them. A bad investment. A sinking ship that needed to be cut loose so the rest of the fleet could sail on. I watched through the curtain as my biological mother leaned over and said something to my father, pointing at the stage with a beaming, performative smile. She was playing the role of the proud matriarch perfectly. She had no idea that the lost cause was standing 30 feet away, watching her every move. Do not ruin your sister's future, I whispered to myself, the words tasting like copper in my mouth. Today, you are going to hear that sentence again, but this time, the context is going to be very different. I reached into the pocket of my gown and pulled out my phone. I had one text message drafted. It was addressed to Mom, the only person on this planet who had earned that title, Talia. My thumb hovered over the send button. I knew Talia was somewhere in the middle of the general admissions section, probably sitting with her nursing friends, holding a bouquet of wildflowers because she knew I hated expensive roses. Talia, who had taken me in when I was a ghost. Talia, who had sat up with me through the vomiting and the night terrors. Talia, who had mortgaged her small house to pay for the tutoring that got me here. She would be worried. She knew what I was planning, in abstract terms, but she did not know the specifics. She was afraid I would re-traumatize myself. She was afraid I would let my anger burn down the life we had built. I typed 3 sentences. I am about to do it. Do not worry. I am only going to tell the truth. I hit send. Then I powered the phone off and slipped it back into my pocket. I looked back at the VIP section. My biological father had finally put his phone away. He was scanning the stage, looking impatient. He was probably wondering how long this would take, how soon he could corner me after the ceremony, flash a fatherly smile, and ask about my signing bonus or my connections to the prestigious medical fellowship I had just been awarded. They had done their research. I knew that. They knew I was the valedictorian. They knew I was receiving the Integrity and Service Medal, which came with a substantial financial grant. They likely assumed that because I had not blocked their number in the last 6 months, a strategic move on my part, that I had softened. They thought time healed all wounds. They thought the silence of a child meant forgiveness. They were about to learn that silence is not forgiveness. Silence is simply the time you spend reloading. I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was the dean of the university, Dr. Aris Thorne. He was a tall man with a mane of white hair and a voice that sounded like it belonged in a Shakespearean play. He held a copy of my speech in his hand, the approved version. "Are you ready, Ren?" he asked, his eyes crinkling with kindness. It is a beautiful speech. The board loved the draft about resilience and the metaphor of the phoenix rising from the ashes. Very inspiring. I looked at the stapled papers in his hand. The speech I had submitted 2 weeks ago. It was a safe speech. It was full of platitudes about overcoming adversity, working hard, and the support of the university community. It was the speech of a good student who follows the rules. "Thank you, Dean Thorne," I said, forcing a smile that did not reach my eyes. "I just hope I can get through it without crying." "You will do fine," he assured me, patting my shoulder. "Just speak from the heart." I nodded. Speak from the heart. If only he knew. I touched the inside pocket of my gown, where a single folded sheet of yellow legal paper rested against my ribs. No one had seen what was written on that page. Not the dean, not Sarah, not even Talia. The teleprompter was loaded with the approved script, but I had no intention of reading a single word of it. But the speech was only half of the trap. My mind flickered to the heavy envelope sitting in the glove compartment of my car in the parking lot. I had spent the last 6 months working with a forensic accountant and a family law attorney, paid for by the stipend from my research grant. We had dug through 13 years of financial records. We had found the GoFundMe campaigns launched in my name after I was abandoned, campaigns that raised $40,000 for a sick child who never saw a dime of it. We had found the credit cards opened in my name when I was 16, destroying a credit score I did not even know I had. I had not just written a speech, I had built a cage. And unlike the one they had left me in, this one was made of ironclad evidence and federal statutes. The house lights dimmed. The murmuring of the crowd swelled and then hushed as the spotlight hit the podium. The heavy bass of the ceremonial music faded out. I took a deep breath. Inhaling the stale air of the gym, I felt the ring on my finger. I felt the ghost of the IV needle in my arm from years ago. I felt the phantom weight of my sister Blair walking out of that hospital room without looking back. I was not the victim today. I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. "Ladies and gentlemen, graduates, and distinguished guests," the dean's voice boomed over the speakers, echoing off the rafters. "It is my distinct honor to introduce our valedictorian and the recipient of this year's Integrity and Service Medal, a student who exemplifies the highest standards of ethics and perseverance. Please welcome Wren Parker." The applause was deafening. It hit me like a physical wall of sound. I stepped out from behind the curtain. The stage lights blinded me for a second, turning the world into a wash of white and gold. I walked to the center of the stage, my heels clicking rhythmically on the polished wood. I looked out into the darkness, past the lights, directly toward the center of the front row. I saw them. My biological mother froze, her hands mid-clap. Her mouth fell open slightly. She was staring at the screen above the stage where my name was projected in 10-foot-tall letters. Wren Parker. She looked confused. She looked at my father. He was squinting at the stage, his face draining of color as he realized the last name did not match his own. They were expecting Wren Miller. They were expecting their property. Instead, they got me. I gripped the sides of the podium. The wood was cool under my palms. I leaned into the microphone, waiting for the applause to die down. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with expectation. I looked directly at the camera that was broadcasting this live stream to the world. Then I let my gaze drop to the VIP section, locking eyes with the woman who had birthed me. I saw the first flicker of true fear in her eyes. She knew. Somewhere deep down, she knew. I didn't smile. The darkness of the auditorium seemed to stretch backward, pulling me away from the podium, away from the graduation, pulling me down a long, dark tunnel of memory. The cheering faded into the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. The smell of floor wax turned into the smell of rubbing alcohol. The bright stage lights became the harsh fluorescent buzz of a hallway in the Pine Haven Regional Medical Center. The world went black. And then, I was 13 again. October of my 13th year tasted like metallic water and felt like the scratchy, industrial-grade paper of an examination table adhering to the back of my thighs. The room inside Pine Haven Regional Medical Center was a windowless box painted a shade of yellow that was likely intended to be cheerful, but had aged into the color of old bruises. It smelled aggressively of lemon-scented disinfectant and the distinct, dusty odor of cheap tissues pulled from a cardboard box. I sat on the edge of the high table, my legs dangling, my feet in white socks that had turned gray at the heels. I was shivering. Though the thermostat on the wall read 72 degrees, it was a bone-deep cold, the kind that starts in the marrow and works its way out. Doctor. Keene sat on a rolling stool across from us. He was a man who looked like he had not slept in a decade, with deep lines etched around his eyes and a kindness in his posture that terrified me more than any scowl could have. Bad news. I would learn. Often came wrapped in gentle voices. He held a manila folder in his hands, tapping the edge of it against his knee in a slow, rhythmic beat. We have the results from the biopsy. Doctor, Keene said. His voice was calm, leveled, and practiced. Ren has what is known as Hodgkin's lymphoma. It is a cancer of the lymphatic system. The word hung in the air like smoke. Cancer. It felt too big for the room, too heavy for my 13-year-old body to carry. I stopped breathing for a moment, waiting for the world to tilt, waiting for my mother to rush forward and wrap her arms around me, to tell the doctor he was wrong, to scream, to cry. I turned my head to the right to look at her. My mother, Ilara, was sitting in the hard plastic guest chair, her purse clutched in her lap with both hands. She did not look at me. She did not look at Dr. Keene. Her gaze was fixed on a small, insignificant scuff mark on the linoleum floor. Her jaw was set tight, the muscles twitching slightly under the skin. It was the face she made when a waiter brought her the wrong order, or when a neighbor parked too close to our driveway. It was not the face of a mother fearing for her child. It was the face of a woman inconvenienced. She was refusing to make eye contact with me. I realized with a sick, sinking feeling that if she looked at me, she would have to acknowledge that I was real, and that this situation was real. By staring at the floor, she could keep me in the abstract. My father, David, cleared his throat. It was a sharp, abrasive sound in the quiet room. He took a pen out of his breast pocket and clicked it open, hovering it over a small leather notebook he carried everywhere. "What is the prognosis?" he asked. He did not ask how I was feeling. He did not ask if I was in pain. He asked for the data. Doctor. Keene shifted his weight, the wheels of his stool squeaking. The good news is that this form of lymphoma is highly treatable, especially in pediatric patients. With the correct protocol of chemotherapy and potentially radiation, the long-term survival rate is over 90%. It is curable. Mr. Miller, but I need to be clear, it is going to be a long road. We are looking at 6 to 8 months of aggressive treatment, followed by years of monitoring. I felt a spark of hope. 90%. That was an A-. I could do 90%. And the cost? My father asked. The question came out instantly, cutting off the doctor's reassuring tone. It was flat, emotionless, and cold. It was the voice he used when negotiating a contractor down on the price of a kitchen renovation. Doctor. Keene blinked, clearly caught off guard by the speed of the transition from survival rates to bank accounts. Well, that depends heavily on your insurance coverage. The treatment is intensive. Chemotherapy drugs, hospital stays, scans, supportive care for side effects. Without insurance, it can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, with your deductible and out-of-pocket maximums, plus the non-covered expenses like travel and time off work. We have the bronze tier plan, my father interrupted, scribbling a number into his notebook. High deductible. The copay on specialists is $50 a visit, but the inpatient care is only covered at 60% until we hit the cap. He was doing math. My life was being reduced to a series of equations in a leather notebook. In the corner of the room, my sister Blair sighed loudly. She was 16, sitting with her legs crossed, balancing a thick biology textbook on her knees. She held her phone up, snapping a picture of her notes, carefully arranging the lighting so the flash would not glare on the page. "Can we hurry this up?" Blair asked, not looking up from her screen as she adjusted a filter. "I have a study group for the PSATs at 4 o'clock. If I am late, Sarah is going to take the spot with the good lighting, and I need to focus. My scholarship application depends on these scores." "Blair, quiet," my father said, but there was no heat in it. It was a distracted command. He looked back at the doctor. So, we are talking about what? 10,000? 20,000 out of pocket? It could be higher. Doctor, Keene admitted, his voice cooling slightly. He looked from my father to me, and I saw a flicker of pity in his eyes. I hated it. There are always unforeseen complications, infection risks, neutropenia. Ren will likely need to be hospitalized for weeks at a time if her immune system crashes. My mother finally spoke. Her voice was brittle. She will miss school? For months? Yes, Doctor, Keene said. She will need to be homeschooled or take a medical leave. Her immune system will be too compromised for a public school environment. Great, my mother muttered, finally looking up, but looking at my father. Not me. So one of us has to stay home. I cannot quit the firm right now. David, we are in the middle of the merger season. If I take leave, they will give my accounts to Janice. I am not taking leave, my father said immediately. We need my income to pay for the premium increase. I felt small. I felt like I was shrinking, dissolving into the paper gown. I wanted to scream that I was right here, that I could hear them, that I was the one with the tumors growing in my chest, not a broken car that needed expensive parts. There are options, Doctor, Keene said, trying to steer the conversation back to a place of empathy. The hospital has a compassionate care fund. There are charities, specifically for families dealing with pediatric cancer. We have a social worker, Mara, who can help you apply for grants. Street, Jude's, the Ronald McDonald House, local community fundraisers. People are very generous when a child is sick. My mother's spine stiffened as if he had slapped her. She looked at the doctor with genuine horror. Charity? She hissed. You want us to beg? You want us to put a jar out at the local gas station with Ren's picture on it? Absolutely not. It is not begging, Mrs. Miller. Doctor, Keene said gently, it is community support. Cancer is expensive. There is no shame in accepting help. There is shame for us, she snapped. We live in Oak Creek. We are respectable people. What will the neighbors think if they see us taking handouts? What will the partners at David's firm think? That we cannot provide for our own family? That we are failing? Mom is right, Blair chimed in, finally looking up from her phone. If people find out we are broke because of Ren, it is going to look so bad on my college applications. Ivy League schools do not want drama cases. They want stability. You promised my college fund was safe. My father stopped writing. He stared at the page, tapping the pen against his chin. Blair's fund, he murmured. $75,000. It has been compounding for 10 years. You cannot touch that, Blair said, her voice rising in pitch. That is for Columbia. That is my future. You promised. I know I promised, my father said, his voice tight. He looked at Dr. Keene. If we treat this condition, and it recurs, if it comes back, there is a chance of relapse, Dr. Keene admitted, about 10 to 15%. So we could spend the college fund, drain the savings, max out the credit cards, and she could still die. My father stated, it was not a question, it was a risk assessment. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and fast. I wiped it away quickly, terrified they would see it. I am scared, I whispered. The words came out barely louder than a breath. I wanted my mother to hear it. I wanted her to cross the 3 feet of distance between us and hold my hand. I wanted her to say that the money did not matter, that the neighbors did not matter, that Blair's college did not matter as much as my life. My mother looked at me then. Her eyes were dry, clear, and annoyed. Ren, do not be dramatic, she said. We are discussing solutions. Crying is not going to fix the cell count. Don't be dramatic. The phrase hit me harder than the diagnosis. I was 13 years old, facing death, and my fear was an inconvenience to her discussion strategy. My father closed his notebook with a snap. He looked at the doctor, and his expression had changed. The calculation was finished. He had reached a bottom line. "Doctor," my father said, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "Hypothetically, if a family cannot pay, if they absolutely cannot afford the treatment, what happens to the child? The hospital does not just turn them away, right? That is illegal." "Doctor." Keene narrowed his eyes. "We treat the patient, we work out payment plans, we sue for the debt if necessary, but we do not deny life-saving care to a minor." "But if the parents are not in the picture," my father said slowly, testing the words. "If the child is a ward of the state, then the state pays, correct? Medicaid picks up the bill. The treatment is fully covered." The air left the room. "Doctor," Keene went very still. "Mr. Miller, are you suggesting what I think you are suggesting?" "I am looking at the numbers," my father said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if he were sharing a stock tip. "We cannot afford this, not without destroying our lives, not without destroying Blair's future. If Wren is, strictly speaking, a ward of the state, she gets the treatment she needs. It is the same medicine, the same doctors, but the financial liability shifts." "You are talking about surrendering custody." "Doctor," Keene said, his voice icy, "you are talking about abandoning your daughter to the foster care system to avoid a bill. It is a strategic move," my mother added. Latching on to the idea, her eyes lit up. It was a way out, a way to save the money and the reputation. "We aren't abandoning her emotionally. We just legally step back, just until she is better, then we can get her back, right? Once the bills are paid?" "That is not how it works." "Doctor," Keene said. Standing up, he was tall, and he loomed over them now. "This is not a financial loophole. This is child abandonment. It is irreversible damage to her psyche." "But she would live," my father argued, standing up to meet him. "And we would survive. Look at the alternative. We go bankrupt. We lose the house. Blair loses college. We all suffer. This way. Only one person has to make a sacrifice." He did not look at me when he said it. He did not have to. I knew who the sacrifice was. I sat there on the crinkling paper, gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. I watched them debate the logistics of discarding me. I watched Blair go back to her phone, satisfied that her college fund was safe. I watched my mother smooth her skirt, relieved she wouldn't have to explain a GoFundMe page to her neighbors. They were not monsters in that moment. They were not screaming or hitting. They were calm, rational, middle-class Americans making a business decision, and I was the red line on the ledger that needed to be erased. "I think," my father said, looking at his watch, "that we need to speak to this social worker you mentioned, but not about grants. We need to ask about the surrender process." "Doctor," Keene looked at me. For the first time, someone in the room looked at me with genuine sorrow. "I will get her," he said softly, "but God forgive you people." My parents did not flinch. They just sat back down, waiting for the next meeting to start, while I sat 5 feet away, slowly realizing that I had just become an orphan. And my parents were still sitting right there. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees the moment Dr. Keene stood up. The sorrow I had seen in his eyes only seconds ago evaporated, replaced by a steely bureaucratic hardness that was terrifying in its efficiency. He did not look at my parents anymore. He looked past them, toward the wall-mounted telephone next to the sink. He picked up the receiver and punched in a 4-digit extension. "This is Dr. Keene in exam room 4, he said. His voice was no longer the soft baritone of a pediatric oncologist. It was the flat, commanding tone of a man reporting a crime in progress. "I need Mara Henson from Social Services down here immediately, and please page security to the pediatric wing. Yes, now." My mother, Ilara, flinched. The word security cracked her composure. She shifted in her seat, smoothing the fabric of her skirt with frantic, jerky movements. "Is that necessary?" she asked, her voice pitching up. "Security? We are not criminals. Doctor, We are concerned parents trying to navigate a complex medical landscape. You are guardians proposing to relinquish custody of a critically ill minor to avoid financial liability. Doctor, Keene replied, hanging up the phone. He crossed his arms over his chest, leaning against the counter, effectively blocking the door. In the eyes of this hospital, that constitutes a potential threat to the patient's welfare. Until Mara arrives, nobody leaves this room. My father, David, snapped his notebook shut. The calculation was done, and now he was switching into damage control mode. He stood up, adjusting his tie, trying to regain the upper hand by physically dominating the space. "Let us not use inflammatory language," my father said, his voice smooth, the practiced cadence of a man who spent his days justifying corporate layoffs. "We are looking for a temporary solution, a bridge. Once Ren is in remission, once the financial burden is stabilized, we will obviously resume our duties. This is a strategic pause." "A strategic pause, Doctor," Keene repeated, the words tasting like acid in his mouth. "You talk about your daughter like she is a underperforming stock option." Before my father could retort, the door opened. Mara Henson did not look like the social workers I had seen on television. She did not look tired or overwhelmed or soft. She looked like a shark in a beige cardigan. She was a small woman, perhaps in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back into a severe knot and wire-rimmed glasses that magnified eyes which had seen every variety of human selfishness imaginable. Behind her stood 2 uniformed security guards, their hands resting casually on their belts. Mara took 1 step into the room, surveyed the scene, the trembling 13-year-old on the table, the parents standing defensively near the chairs, the teenager on her phone, and she understood everything instantly. "Doctor, Keene?" she asked, not taking her eyes off my father. "Refusal to treat based on financial considerations." "Doctor," Keene summarized rapidly, "they have requested information on surrendering custody to the state to force Medicaid coverage." Mara's expression did not change. She did not gasp. She did not scowl. She simply walked over to the desk, placed a thick clipboard down with a heavy thud, and turned to face my parents. "I am Mara Henson, Senior Case Manager for Child Protective Services, attached to Pinehaven," she said. Her voice was dry, crisp, and devoid of warmth. "I need to clarify something before we proceed. There is no such thing as a temporary pause on parenthood. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, you do not check your child into the foster system like you check a coat at a restaurant." "We are under extreme financial duress," my mother interjected, her hands fluttering near her throat. "If we pay for this treatment, we will lose everything, our home, our other daughter's education. Surely the state has programs for families in crisis." "We do," Mara said. "We have sliding scale billing. We have grants. Doctor, Keene offered those. You refuse them." "We cannot accept charity," my father said stubbornly. "It is a matter of principle." "So your principle allows you to abandon your child, but not to accept a grant?" Mara asked. She pulled a pen from her pocket and clicked it. The sound echoed in the silence. "Let us be clear about what happens next. If you walk out that door without Ren, you are not strategizing. You are committing a custodial violation. You will be signing a voluntary placement agreement, but given the circumstances, I will be filing a report for medical neglect. This will go on a record, a permanent one." My father paled slightly, but his resolve held. He was terrified of poverty, not of paperwork. He believed he could out-negotiate a bureaucracy. "If we sign," he said, lowering his voice, "does the state cover the chemotherapy, starting today?" Mara looked at him for a long 5 seconds. "Yes, once she is a ward of the state, she is eligible for full Medicaid coverage immediately. The state assumes liability." "Then we sign," my father said. I sat on the table, my legs swinging slightly, hitting the metal frame with a hollow clank. Clank, clank. I felt like I was watching a play. I was the prop in the center of the stage, and the actors were arguing over who had to carry me off. Mara pulled a sheaf of documents from the clipboard. They were dense, covered in small print. She laid them out on the counter. "This is a transfer of custody," she explained, pointing to the signature line. "By signing this, you are ceding legal decision-making power to the Department of Children and Families. You are stating that you are unable or unwilling to provide for the medical needs of your child. We will place Wren in emergency foster care. Given her condition, that will likely mean she stays here, in the hospital, until a medical foster home is found. Will we have visitation?" my mother asked. Her voice trembling. She was trying to salvage her self-image. She wanted to be the tragic mother who had to make a hard choice, not the villain. "That will be determined by a family court judge," Mara said coldly. "But usually, when parents abandon a child at the onset of a life-threatening illness, the court is not generous with visitation." My father picked up the pen. He did not look at me. He looked at the line where his name was typed. David Miller. "It is for the best, Wren," he said, addressing the paper, not me. "You will get the best care. We are doing this to save you," he signed. The scratch of the pen was loud, like a knife dragging across bone. He handed the pen to my mother. She hesitated. For a second, just 1 second. I thought she might throw it down. I thought she might rush over, grab me, and tell my father to go to hell. I held my breath, my lungs burning. She took the pen. "Be brave, honey," she whispered to the room at large. And then she signed. It was done, in the span of 2 minutes. I had gone from being Wren Miller, daughter of David and Alara, to being case number 49221, ward of the state. Mara pulled the papers away instantly, as if she did not want their hands touching them a second longer than necessary. She checked the signatures, stamped the bottom of the page, and looked up. "You need to leave," she said. "Now. Can we say goodbye?" my mother asked, looking toward me with wet, guilty eyes. "I think you have said enough." "Doctor," Keene interrupted. He stepped forward, opening the door to the hallway. "Please vacate the premises. Security will escort you to your vehicle." My father nodded, brisk and businesslike. He checked his watch. "Come on, Elara. We need to beat the traffic if we're going to make it back for dinner." He walked out. He did not look back. My mother lingered for a heartbeat. She looked at me, her hand half raised. But then she looked at Mara's stern face and the looming security guards. Shame won out over love. She turned and followed my father. And then there was Blair, my sister, who had been sitting in the corner the entire time. Stood up. She slid her biology textbook into her expensive leather tote bag. She wrapped her scarf around her neck. She looked annoyed, as if this entire meeting had been a boring assembly she was forced to attend. She walked toward the door. As she passed the exam table, I reached out a hand. I didn't mean to. It was a reflex. I just wanted to touch someone familiar. "Blair?" I whispered. She didn't stop. She didn't pause. She didn't even turn her head. She walked right past my outstretched hand, her eyes fixed on the exit sign. "Finally," I heard her mutter under her breath as she crossed the threshold. "I am going to be so late." The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room and left me gasping. They were gone, just like that. No tearful hug, no promise to return. Just the squeak of sneakers on linoleum and the click of a latch. I looked down at my hand, the one I had reached out to Blair. It was trembling. I made a fist, squeezing it until my fingernails dug into my palm. "Okay, doctor," Keene said. His voice was thick. He walked over to the table and placed a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy and warm. "Okay, Wren, breathe." I took a breath. It shuddered in my chest. "Where do I go?" I asked. My voice sounded tiny, like a child's voice. "Do I go to the orphanage?" "No," Mara said. Stepping closer, her shark-like demeanor had softened. She looked at me with a fierce, protective intensity. "You are staying right here. We have a room ready for you in the pediatric oncology wing. A nice one, with a window." "My parents," I started, but I couldn't finish the sentence. They are not your parents right now, Mara said firmly. They are just the people who signed a paper. You are my job now, Ren, and I am very good at my job. The next few hours were a blur of motion. I was moved from the clinic to a room on the 4th floor. Nurses came and went, speaking in soft, cooing voices. They drew blood. They put an IV line in my arm. They brought me a tray of food, macaroni and cheese and green jello, that I couldn't eat. Night fell. The hospital shifted into its nocturnal rhythm. The lights in the hallway dimmed to a low amber glow. The sounds of the day, telephones, carts, chatter, were replaced by the rhythmic whoosh-click of ventilators and the steady beep-beep-beep of heart monitors. I lay in the hospital bed, the sheets stiff and smelling of bleach. I was alone. I stared at the ceiling tiles. I counted the little dots in the pattern, 142 dots in the tile directly above my head. Fear came then. But it wasn't the fear of the cancer. The lumps in my neck didn't scare me. The idea of chemotherapy didn't scare me. What terrified me was the silence. If I died right now, in this bed, who would know? If I stopped breathing, the machine would beep, and a nurse would come running. Yes, but who would care? My parents were probably at home right now, eating dinner. My father was probably updating his ledger, moving the rent expense column to 0. Blair was probably studying for her PSATs, relieved that the distraction was gone. I had ceased to exist in their world. I was a deleted file. The door to my room creaked open. A sliver of light cut across the floor. It was Dr. Keene. He had taken off his white coat. He was wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt and looking exhausted. He held 2 cups of hot chocolate. "I thought you might be awake," he said softly. He pulled a chair up to the side of my bed and sat down. He handed me one of the cups. It was warm. "Dr. Keene?" I asked. "Call me Dr. K," he said. "We are going to be seeing a lot of each other." "Did I do something wrong?" I asked. The question had been burning in my throat for hours. Did I get sick because I was bad? Is that why they left? "Doctor." Keene set his cup down on the tray table. He leaned forward, looking me dead in the eye. "Listen to me, Ren," he said, and his voice was fierce. "You did nothing. Nothing. Cancer is biology, not karma. And what happened today? That was not about you. That was about them. It was about their fear, their greed, and their weakness." He reached out and tapped the back of my hand. "You were not abandoned today. Ren," he said, "I know it feels like it, but try to look at it differently. You were not thrown away. You were transferred. You were moved from the hands of people who did not deserve to hold you, into the hands of people who will fight for you. You are safe here. We do not leave people behind." I nodded, sipping the hot chocolate. It was too sweet, but the warmth felt good in my empty stomach. "Get some sleep, Doctor," Keene said, standing up. "Tomorrow is a big day. We start fighting back." He left the room, leaving the door cracked open a few inches so I wouldn't be in total darkness. I closed my eyes, trying to believe him. Outside in the hallway, I heard voices, low, hushed whispers. It was Dr. Keene and Mara. They were standing near the nurses' station. "I filed the report." Mara's voice drifted through the crack in the door. "But there is something strange about this, Jim." "Strange how?" "Doctor," Keene whispered back. "The financial disclosure form they filled out," Mara said. "The father claimed destitution. He claimed their assets were tied up. Liquid cash was 0, but I ran a preliminary credit check. Just standard procedure for the state reimbursement filing. And his credit score is 810, Mara murmured. "And I found a property listing. They just bought a vacation rental in the Poconos 3 months ago. Paid cash, $300,000. I opened my eyes in the dark. "They aren't broke," Mara whispered, her voice tightening with disgust. "They have the money. They just didn't want to spend it on her." "Keep digging." "Doctor," Keene said, his voice cold as ice. "Keep the file open. Mara, this isn't over." I lay there in the dark, the beeping of the monitor keeping time with my heart. They have the money. The sadness in my chest began to harden. It cooled, crystallized, and turned into something sharp. I wasn't just a burden they couldn't afford. I was a choice they had made. They had chosen a vacation house over my life. I touched the lumps on my neck. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "Okay." I didn't know it then, but that was the moment Wren Miller died, and Wren Parker began to form. The silence of the oncology ward at 2 a.m. was not empty. It was heavy. It pressed against your eardrums, filled with the ghostly mechanical sighs of infusion pumps and the distant squeak of rubber soles on linoleum. I was lying awake, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars someone had stuck to the ceiling tiles years ago, wondering if the kid who put them there was still alive. My parents had been gone for 48 hours. The shock had worn off, replaced by a dull, aching void in my chest that hurt worse than the swollen lymph nodes pressing against my windpipe. The door to my room pushed open. It wasn't the tentative, apologetic push of the day shift nurses who looked at me with tragic, wet eyes. It was a firm, deliberate entrance. Talia Crow walked in. She was the night charge nurse, a woman who looked like she was carved out of oak rather than flesh and bone. She was tall, with broad shoulders and skin the color of deep mahogany. Her hair was braided back in tight, practical rows, and her scrubs were a dark, no-nonsense navy blue, devoid of the cartoon characters or cheerful patterns the other pediatric nurses wore. She didn't smell like vanilla or flowers. She smelled like coffee and peppermint soap. She didn't turn on the overhead light. She moved through the shadows with the grace of a predator, checking the monitors, adjusting the drip on my IV, and noting the numbers on the digital display without waking me, or so she thought. "You are awake," she said. Her voice was an alto rumble, low and smooth, like a cello string being plucked in a quiet room. It wasn't a question. "I can't sleep," I whispered. My voice sounded rusty. Talia pulled the rolling stool over to the side of my bed. She didn't hover. She sat down, resting her elbows on her knees, bringing her face level with mine. Her eyes were dark and steady. They weren't looking at me, scanning for symptoms. They were looking into me. They were listening eyes. "Pain?" she asked. "No," I said. "Thinking?" "Dangerous time for thinking," she murmured. "The brain likes to eat itself when the sun goes down." She reached into the deep pocket of her scrubs and pulled out a deck of playing cards. The box was worn at the corners, the cardboard soft and fraying. She shuffled them with a practiced bridge, the cards snapping together with a satisfying thwip, thwip, thwip. "Do you know how to play gin rummy?" she asked. "No," I said. "Good. I will teach you. It is better than staring at the ceiling and waiting for the world to make sense." She dealt the cards onto the adjustable tray table. For the next hour, we didn't talk about cancer. We didn't talk about the fact that my last name was now a file number in a cabinet downstairs. We talked about suits and runs and discarding. Talia didn't let me win. She played aggressively, slapping her cards down with a competitive flair that forced me to focus, to strategize, to pull my mind out of the pit of self-pity and into the game. When I finally managed to beat her, laying down a winning hand of 3 kings, she nodded in approval. "You are sharp," she said. "I like that." She gathered the cards, squaring the deck. The room was quiet again, but it felt less oppressive now. "Nurse Talia?" I asked. "Just Talia," she corrected. "I answer to Nurse Crow if I'm writing you up for skipping meds, but right now, it is just Talia. Is it going to be okay?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. It was the question every adult answered with a lie. They always said yes. They always said, "You are strong," or "We will beat this." Talia looked at me. She didn't smile. She didn't reach out to pat my hand. She sat back on the stool and crossed her arms. "I do not know," she said. The honesty hit me like a splash of cold water. It was shocking. And strangely, it was the most comforting thing anyone had said to me in days. "I have seen kids walk out of here and run marathons," Talia continued, her voice steady. And I have seen kids who fight like hell and still don't make it. This disease is a beast. Ren, it does not care if you are nice or mean or rich or poor. So I am not going to sit here and lie to you and promise you a rainbow. She leaned forward again, her expression fierce. But I will promise you this, she said. It is going to be hard. It is going to hurt, but you are not going to do any of it alone. Not 1 minute. If you are throwing up at 4 a.m, I will be holding the bucket. If you are scared, I will be in the chair. You might have to walk through the fire, kid, but I am going to be walking right next to you holding the hose. Deal? I looked at her. I saw the exhaustion in the lines around her eyes, but I also saw a strength that seemed inexhaustible. Deal, I whispered. Talia reached into her pocket again and pulled out a small notepad and a pen. She ripped off a sheet of paper and slid it toward me. My brother had leukemia when he was 15, she said casually. As if she were talking about the weather, I looked up, surprised. He did? Yeah, nasty stuff. Acute myeloid leukemia? She tapped the paper. He used to panic, felt like his whole life was spinning out, like he was just a passenger in a car driving off a cliff. So we made a list, the control list. What is that? Write down 3 things you can control right now, she instructed. Everything else, the chemo, the doctors, the parents who walk out, that belongs to the universe. You cannot touch that, but find me 3 things that belong to you. I stared at the blank paper. It felt impossible. I controlled nothing. I was a ward of the state. I was a patient. I was a victim. Think smaller, Talia coached. I thought. I looked at my feet. I can control if I wear socks or not, I said. Good, she said. Write it down. I wrote, 1. Socks. I can control which juice I drink with my pills, I added. Excellent. Number 2? 2, apple or grape. I hesitated on the third one. I looked at Talia. She was waiting, patient as a mountain. I can control if I cry or not, I said. Talia shook her head slowly. No, you cannot control that. Tears are just rain. Ren, let them fall. Try again. I thought about the game we just played. I thought about the way my brain felt sharper when I was focusing on the cards. I can control what I think about, I said. I can think about the game instead of the sickness. Bingo, Talia said. 3. Where my mind goes. I looked at the list. It was short. It was silly. But it was mine. For the first time in 48 hours, I felt like I was holding the steering wheel, even if it was just a toy wheel. My brother, Talia said, taking the pen back but leaving the list with me. He made it. He is 30 now, got 2 ugly kids, and a dog that smells like corn chips. She chuckled, a low, warm sound. But when he was sick? Man, we were tired. My mom worked double shifts. My dad slept in the waiting room chair so much he walked with a limp for a year. We were broke. We were exhausted, and we smelled like cafeteria food. She looked at me, her expression softening. But nobody ran, she said. Nobody checked out. That is what family is. Ren, it is not about blood or last names or who pays for college. Family is the people who stay when it gets ugly. Family is the people who are too tired to stand up but refuse to sit down because you need them. She stood up to check the IV bag, her movements efficient and gentle. You have had a run of bad luck with the people assigned to you by biology, she said, her back to me. But biology is the least important part of the equation. You remember that, before she left the room to check on the patient next door. I felt a sudden surge of panic. The darkness of the room seemed to crowd in again. Talia, I called out. She stopped at the door. Yeah? If I get scared, I started, then stopped, feeling foolish. If you get scared, she said, you knock on the bed rail, like this. She tapped her knuckles against the metal frame of my bed. Tap, tap, 2 solid, rhythmic beats. You knock twice, she said, and if I am within earshot, I will knock back once, Just to let you know I heard you. Just to let you know I am here. She tapped the door frame once, a single, solid thud. Try it, she commanded. I reached out and tapped the metal rail. Clink, clink. Talia immediately tapped the door frame. Thud. I am here, she said. Get some sleep. Ren. Over the next 3 weeks, that rhythm became my language. When the nausea from the chemotherapy hit me so hard I couldn't speak, I would tap the rail, clink, clink, and from the hallway, or the nurse's station, or sometimes right beside my ear, I would hear the answer, thud. It was a tether, a lifeline in the dark, but the darkness wasn't just medical, it was legal. Mara Henson, the social worker, came back on a rainy Tuesday morning. She looked more tired than usual. She carried a thick binder under her arm, and the moment I saw it, my stomach dropped faster than it did during a chemo bolus. She pulled up a chair. Talia was in the room, changing my sheets while I sat in the recliner. Talia didn't leave. She just slowed her movements, her ears tuning in. Ren, Mara began, opening the binder. We need to talk about placement. Doctor, Keene says you are responding well enough to the first round that you might be discharged to outpatient care in 2 weeks. Discharged where? I asked. My hands started to sweat. Well, that is the challenge, Mara admitted. She adjusted her glasses. Because of your medical needs, the central line, the medication schedule, the risk of infection, we cannot place you in a standard foster home. Most foster parents are not trained for this level of care. She flipped a page. I saw rows of names, most of them crossed out with red ink. I have reached out to 3 medical foster homes in the county, Mara said. 2 are full. 1 is not currently accepting teenagers. They prefer infants. So where do I go? I asked. The panic was rising in my throat, tasting like bile. There is a group home in the next county over, Mara said, her voice careful. It is a therapeutic facility. They have nurses on staff. It is institutional. I will be honest, it is not a house. It is a facility. But they can handle your medical needs. A facility, an institution. I thought about the stories I had heard. Dormitories, locks on the doors, being just another number in a sea of unwanted kids. I looked at Talia. She was standing on the other side of the bed, holding a pillowcase. She had stopped moving. Her face was unreadable, but her grip on the pillowcase was tight. I don't want to go to a facility, I whispered. Please. I am trying. Ren, Mara said, and I could hear the frustration in her voice. But the system is overwhelmed. Finding a home for a 13-year-old with cancer it is a very specific ask. The room went silent. The rain lashed against the window. I felt tears pricking my eyes. The one thing I couldn't control. I will take her. The voice came from the other side of the bed. It was deep, calm, and absolute. Mara turned around. I looked up. Talia tossed the pillowcase onto the mattress. She walked around the foot of the bed and stood next to Mara. She looked like a mountain moving. Excuse me? Mara asked. I said I will take her, Talia repeated. I am certified. I did the foster certification classes 4 years ago. My license is active. I renewed it last month. Mara blinked. Talia, you are a single woman working night shifts. You know the protocols for... I know the protocols better than you do, Mara. Talia interrupted. I work 3/12s. I have 4 days off a week. My sister lives 2 blocks away, and she is a retired paramedic. She can cover the gaps. I have a guest room that is empty. It is clean. It is close to the hospital. This is highly irregular, Mara said, though I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. She was looking for a solution, and one had just walked up wearing scrubs. Conflict of interest? Dual relationships? She is my patient, Talia said, shrugging. Foster parents take in kids with medical needs all the time. Who is better qualified to watch for sepsis than the nurse who hung the chemo bag? You want to send her to a group home where she is going to be bullied for being bald and weak? Or do you want to send her to a home where she is going to be safe? Doctor. Keen walked in then, holding my chart. He stopped, sensing the tension in the room. What is happening? He asked. Talia is offering to take placement of Ren, Mara said, looking at the doctor. Doctor. Keen looked at Talia. He didn't look surprised. He looked resigned, as if he had seen this coming. Talia, doctor, Keen said, his voice serious. You know what this means. This isn't just for a few weeks. If those parents don't come back, and my gut says they won't, this could be years. This is a teenager. With cancer, it is going to be expensive, exhausting, and emotionally draining. You are going to get attached, and it is going to break your heart. Talia didn't flinch. She didn't look at Dr. Keen. She looked at me. She looked at my bald head. She looked at the dark circles under my eyes. She looked at the terror that was vibrating off me like heat waves. I know exactly what it is, Talia said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it filled the room. I told her she wouldn't be alone. I meant it. She turned to Dr. Keen. Do you have a better option? Doctor? Because if you put this girl in a group home, she is going to give up. I have seen it happen. She needs a home. Doctor, Keen sighed. He closed the chart. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I will write a letter of recommendation for the placement, he said. Mara, expedite the background check update. Let's get the paperwork started. Mara nodded, already pulling a different form out of her binder. I can do an emergency kinship placement override since there is a pre-existing relationship. We can have it approved in 48 hours. Talia turned back to me. Well? She asked. She didn't treat me like a charity case. She treated me like a partner in the decision. I have a small house. The paint in the guest room is ugly. It is lime green because the previous owner had bad taste. And I cook a lot of spicy food, but it is quiet, and nobody is going to look at you like a walking bill. She paused, waiting. You want to come home with me? Ren? I tried to speak. My throat felt like it was closed shut with glue. I thought about the control list. I couldn't control the cancer. I couldn't control my parents, but I could control this. I looked at Talia. I saw the woman who had played cards with me at 3 a.m. I saw the person who had knocked back. Yes, I choked out. It was just one word, but as it hung in the air, mixing with the smell of peppermint and rain, I knew that my life had just pivoted. The old Ren Miller was gone. Someone new was starting to breathe. The transition from the sterile white of the hospital to the warm, cluttered beige of Talia's bungalow felt like stepping from a vacuum into a kaleidoscope. The house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in the suburbs, boasting a porch that leaned slightly to the left and a front lawn that was more dandelion than grass. It was imperfect, lived in, and terrifyingly real. When Talia unlocked the front door that first day, carrying my meager bag of belongings, I stood on the welcome mat, hesitating. My old life had taught me that thresholds were dangerous things, places where you had to wipe your feet, hold your breath, and apologize for taking up space. Well? Talia asked, nudging the door open with her hip. You waiting for an invitation? You live here. Ren, get inside. She led me down a short hallway to a room at the back of the house. I braced myself for the lime green walls she had warned me about. The ugly guest room. But when she pushed the door open, the walls were not green. They were a soft, muted lavender, the exact shade of the hydrangeas I had pointed out in a magazine 3 days ago in the hospital waiting room. Muttering that they looked peaceful, I froze in the doorway. The smell of fresh paint was faint but unmistakable. She must have stayed up all night painting it while I was sleeping off my last chemo round. You changed it, I whispered. Green gave me a headache, Talia lied smoothly, setting my bag on the bed. And I figured if you are going to be staring at walls for a while, they might as well be a color that does not make you want to vomit. I walked in, touching the wall. It wasn't just paint, it was a claim. Talia, I said, my voice small. I can just sleep on the couch if you need this room. I don't want to be in the way. I know this is just temporary placement. Talia stopped unpacking. She turned around slowly, her face serious. She walked over to me, placed her hands on my shoulders, and looked me in the eye with that intensity that made me feel like she could see my skeleton. "We need to get one thing straight right now," she said. "There are no guests in this house. Guests have to ask for water. Guests have to worry about overstaying their welcome. You are not a guest. You are not placement. You live here. This is your room. That is your fridge. If you want to eat pickles at 3 in the morning, you eat pickles. We do not have people who stay here. Ren, we only have people who belong here. Do you understand?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I understand." "Good," she said, releasing me. "Now, put your socks in the drawer. Dinner is in 20 minutes. The months that followed were a blur of nausea, exhaustion, and a strange, terrifying kind of happiness. The treatment protocol was brutal. There were days when my body felt like it was made of lead and broken glass. On the bad days, the days when the chemo brain fog was so thick I couldn't remember my middle name. Talia turned the living room into a fortress. She would drag the mattress off the guest bed into the living room, pile it with every blanket in the house, and we would watch terrible, low-budget sci-fi movies. "Look at that special effect," Talia would critique, spooning broth into my mouth when my hands were too shaky to hold the bowl. "That alien looks like a rubber chicken wrapped in tinfoil," I would giggle, and then the giggle would turn into a cough, and the cough would turn into dry heaving. Talia never flinched. She was steady as a rock, rubbing my back, cleaning up the mess, and pressing a cool cloth to my forehead without breaking her commentary on the movie. "Breathe through it, baby girl," she would murmur. "It is just the medicine fighting the bad guys. Let them fight." But there were good days, too. Days when my white blood cell count was up and the sun was shining. On those days, Talia would wrap me in 3 layers of sweaters and drive us to the park at the edge of town. We wouldn't run or play. We would just sit on a bench near the duck pond, watching the world move. "See that lady?" Talia pointed to a woman walking a poodle. "I bet she is a retired librarian who secretly listens to heavy metal." "No way," I argued, squinting against the sunlight. "She looks like she bakes cookies. Never judge a book. Ren," Talia grinned. "People are layers. You, for example, you look like a quiet little mouse, but I know you have got a roar in there somewhere." Healing wasn't just physical. Talia made sure of that. Every Thursday afternoon, rain or shine, she drove me to a small brick building downtown to see Dr. Aris, a therapist who smelled like old books and peppermint tea. "I don't need therapy," I had argued the first time, crossing my arms. "I'm fine. I just have cancer." "You have abandonment trauma and a life-threatening illness, and you are 13, Talia had countered, starting the car. "The body heals with medicine. The heart heals with words. You are going." Doctor. Aris didn't make me talk about my parents at first. We talked about school. We talked about the fear of dying. We talked about how much I hated the pitying looks from strangers. Slowly, layer by layer, I began to unpack the suitcase of shame my parents had left me with. I realized that their leaving wasn't a verdict on my worth. It was a verdict on their character. When my hair started to fall out in clumps, clogging the shower drain, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until I couldn't breathe. I looked in the mirror and saw a monster. Pale, bloated from steroids, bald. Talia knocked on the door. Knock. Knock. I tapped back. Weak and pathetic. Clink. Clink. She came in with a pair of electric clippers and a towel. "We are not going to let it fall out," she said firmly. "My dad always said Blair was the smart one and I was the creative one." "Creative is code for, we did not bother to teach you," Talia scoffed. She pulled a chair up next to me at the kitchen table. She was wearing her reading glasses, a nursing textbook open on her side, my algebra book on mine. "We are going to learn this," she said. "Together, if I can memorize the entire interactions list of beta blockers, you can learn how to solve for X." We developed a system. I couldn't sit in a classroom, so we did school at the kitchen table, often at odd hours when the steroids kept me awake. Talia taught me to look for patterns. She showed me that history wasn't just dates. It was stories about people making choices. She showed me that biology wasn't just diagrams, it was the machinery of life. The very thing fighting inside my veins. I discovered something that shocked me. I wasn't stupid. I was actually terrifyingly good at analysis. I could look at a complex paragraph and strip it down to its core argument in seconds. I could memorize datasets faster than Talia could quiz me. One night, after I rattled off the entire periodic table and the atomic weights without looking at the book, Talia took off her glasses and stared at me. "You are not average. Ren," she said, her voice serious. "Whoever told you that you were average was lying to keep you small. You have a steel trap up there." "Really?" I asked, feeling a flush of pride that had nothing to do with fever. "Really," she said. "You are going to be dangerous when you grow up. I pity the fool who tries to outsmart you." Winter turned to spring. The lavender room became my sanctuary. The nausea began to recede, replaced by a tentative appetite. My hair started to grow back, soft, fuzzy duckling down that Talia insisted on petting every time she walked past me. Then came the envelope. It was from the Department of Children and Families. I saw it in the mail pile and felt my blood run cold. Every time the state got involved, my life fell apart. Talia picked it up. She didn't open it immediately. She made tea. She sat me down on the couch. "Ren," she said, holding the envelope, "we need to talk about the future." "Are they sending me away?" I asked, my hands gripping the cushion. "Did the money run out?" "No," Talia said. "This is about the termination of parental rights, your biological parents. They have not contested the state's motion. They have signed the final surrender papers. They are legally no longer your parents." I felt a strange hollowness. It wasn't grief. It was more like the feeling of a phantom limb finally disappearing. "So I am an orphan," I stated. "Legally, yes," Talia said. "Which means you are available for adoption." She took a deep breath, for the first time since I met her. Talia Crow looked nervous. Her hands were trembling slightly. "I submitted a petition," she said, her voice tight, "to the court, asking to be the permanent adoptive parent, not foster, permanent." She looked at me, her eyes searching my face for rejection. "I know I am not rich," she said, speaking faster now. "And I work weird hours, and this house is old, and I know you probably dreamed of a mom and a dad and a golden retriever and a big backyard." "Talia," I interrupted, "but I promise," she kept going, "that nobody will ever fight harder for you. I promise that you will never wonder if you are wanted. I promise—" "Talia!" I shouted, louder this time. She stopped. "Yes," I said. "Yes, what?" "Yes, I want you to adopt me. You are already my mom. The paper just catches up to the truth." Talia burst into tears. It was the first time I had ever seen her cry. She pulled me into a hug that squeezed the breath out of me, smelling of peppermint and laundry detergent and safety. The process took another 3 months. There were home visits, background checks, and interviews where I had to tell a judge that yes, I felt safe, and yes, I had my own toothbrush. On the morning of my 14th birthday, we went to the courthouse. I wore a dress Talia had bought me. Yellow. Like sunshine. Talia wore a suit that made her look like a senator. The judge was an old man with kind eyes. He asked me one question. "Ren, do you understand that this adoption is permanent? That Ms. Crow will be your legal mother for the rest of your life?" "I understand," I said. "It is the only thing I want." He banged the gavel. "Petition granted," he said. "Congratulations. Ren Parker." Parker, Talia's last name. It felt strange on my tongue, but good, solid. Miller had been a label of ownership. Parker felt like an invitation. We celebrated by going to a diner and eating pancakes for dinner. Talia gave me a small velvet box. I don't have much money left after the legal fees, she apologized. But I wanted you to have this. I opened the box. Inside lay a delicate silver chain with a pendant. It was 2 letters, intertwined in a modern, stylized font. WT, Ren and Talia. It is not real silver, she admitted, but it is strong. It's perfect, I said, letting her clasp it around my neck. The metal was cool against my skin. I touched it, feeling the shape of the letters. It is a reminder, Talia said, sipping her coffee. We are a team, Parker and Parker, us against the world. Us against the world, I repeated. That night, lying in my lavender room, I listened to the sounds of the house, the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the floorboards settling, the distant sound of Talia watching TV in the living room. I touched the necklace. I touched the scar on my chest where the central line used to be. I was 14 years old. I had survived cancer. I had survived abandonment. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for the exit. I closed my eyes. Knock, knock. I tapped on the wall beside my bed. A second later, from the living room, came the answer. Firm and steady. Thud. I was home. The envelope looked innocent enough. It was a standard business size, crisp white, with a window on the front that displayed my name and address. But it wasn't addressed to Ren Parker. It was addressed to Ren Miller. I was 16 years old, a junior in high school, and I had spent the last 3 years scrubbing the name Miller off my skin like it was grime. Seeing it typed there, in bold black ink, felt like seeing a ghost standing on Talia's front porch. I was standing in the kitchen, holding the mail. Talia was at the stove, frying plantains for dinner, humming a tune she had heard on the radio. The house smelled of hot oil and garlic, a safe smell, a home smell. But as I stared at that envelope, the safety evaporated. My heart started to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, hummingbird rhythm that I hadn't felt since the chemo days. Talia? I said. My voice was tight. Talia turned around, spatula in hand. She saw my face before she saw the letter. Her expression shifted instantly from relaxed to alert. She dropped the spatula on the counter and walked over to me, wiping her hands on her apron. "What is it?" she asked. I held the letter out. My hand was shaking so hard the paper rattled. "It has my old name," I whispered, "and it says, 'Urgent, final notice.'" Talia took the envelope. She looked at the return address. It was a collection agency based in Delaware. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't hesitate. She ripped the top of the envelope open with a sharp, violent tear, pulled out the folded letter, and snapped it open. She read it in silence. I watched her eyes scan the lines. I saw her jaw clench, the muscles popping tight. She breathed out through her nose, a slow, angry sound, like a bull getting ready to charge. "What?" I asked, terrified. "Did they find me? Are they trying to take me back?" "No," Talia said, her voice dangerously low. "They are not trying to take you back. They are trying to get paid." She slammed the letter down on the kitchen island. "It is a debt collection notice," she said, "for a credit line issued by a furniture store. The balance is $4,200. It is 90 days past due." I stared at the paper. "But I don't have a credit card. I'm 16. I can't even buy a lottery ticket." "I know," Talia said. She looked at the date on the letter. "The account was opened 3 years ago. Ren, in November, 2 weeks after you moved in here." My stomach dropped. November, 3 years ago. I was bald. I was sleeping 18 hours a day. I was fighting for my life in the lavender room. I wasn't buying furniture. "It is identity theft," Talia said. "And I have a very strong suspicion I know exactly who the thieves are." The fear that had paralyzed me a moment ago began to shift. It curdled into something hotter, sharper. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was violation. They had left me to die. And then they had used my name, my existence, to buy a sofa? We need to call Mara, I said. Mara Henson was no longer my caseworker. My adoption had closed that file. But she had remained a fierce ally when we called her and explained the letter. She didn't sound surprised. She sounded weary. "Come to my office tomorrow after school," Mara said over the speakerphone. "Bring the letter, and bring your birth certificate. We are going to run a full credit check. If there is one cockroach, there are usually more inside the walls." The next afternoon, inside Mara's cluttered office, the full picture emerged. It was not just a cockroach. It was an infestation. Mara sat at her computer, her face illuminated by the blue light of the screen. The printer in the corner began to whir, spitting out page after page of warm paper. I sat in the chair, gripping the armrests, watching the stack grow. "Okay," Mara said, picking up the stack. She adjusted her glasses. "This is worse than I thought. Ren, your social security number has been used to open 5 separate accounts in the last 3 years. She laid the pages out on the desk like a solitaire game from hell. 1 furniture store credit line, Mara listed, 1 electronics financing account, 2 major credit cards, and a utility bill for an apartment in, wait for it, the Poconos. The vacation house, I whispered. I remembered the conversation I had overheard in the hospital room. The night doctor. Keene told me I was safe. They just bought a vacation rental in the Poconos. Paid cash. "They put the utilities in my name?" I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. "It looks like they put the utilities in the name of Ren Miller 3 years ago," Mara confirmed. "And then they stopped paying the bill 6 months ago. That is why the collection agencies are waking up now. The accounts are defaulting." I felt dirty. I felt like they had reached out from the past and smeared their greed all over my new life. I had worked so hard to be Ren Parker. I had straight A grades. I was president of the debate club. I volunteered at the animal shelter. I was clean, and they had turned my name into a bad debt. "How can they do this?" I asked. "I was a minor." "They are your biological parents," Mara said, her voice dripping with disgust. "They had your social security number. They had your birth certificate. It is surprisingly easy for parents to open accounts in their children's names. Most banks don't verify the age properly if the applicant has the master identification documents. It is called familial fraud, and it is a crime." Talia reached over and covered my hand with hers. Her palm was warm and rough. "We are going to file a police report," Talia said firmly. "Today, we are going to dispute every single penny. I don't care if it takes 10 years. They are not pinning this on her." "I can help with the disputes," Mara said. "But there is something else." Mara hesitated. She looked at me, then at Talia. She opened a drawer in her desk and pulled out a manila folder. It looked old. The edges were battered. "When you called me yesterday," Mara said, "I went back into the archives. I pulled the original surrender file. I wanted to check the dates of the custody transfer against the dates these accounts were opened to prove fraud." She opened the file. "I went down a rabbit hole," Mara admitted. "I started looking at their digital footprint from that year. The year you got sick." She turned the laptop screen toward me. "I found this," she said. "It is archived on the Wayback Machine. The original site was taken down 2 years ago, but the internet never forgets." I looked at the screen. It was a screenshot of a crowdfunding page. The banner image was a photo of me. I remembered that photo. It was taken in the hospital cafeteria. 2 days after my diagnosis, I was wearing a hospital gown, looking pale and terrified, holding a juice box. My mother had taken it. She had said, "Smile, honey. We need to send a picture to Grandma." She hadn't sent it to Grandma. The title of the campaign was written in bold, tragic font. "Help Ren fight for her life." I read the text underneath. It was a masterpiece of fiction. "Our beloved daughter Ren has been diagnosed with aggressive lymphoma. Our hearts are broken. As we take time off work to be by her bedside, the medical bills are mounting. We are humble people, and we are asking for your prayers and support to save our little girl. Every dollar goes to her treatment." "They used me," I whispered. The air left my lungs. Look at the updates, Mara pointed. I scrolled down. Update, October 12th. Ren is starting chemo today. She is so brave. Please keep sharing. Update, November 1st. The doctors say the new medication is expensive, but we will do whatever it takes. Thank you to everyone who donated. November 1st. That was 3 days after they signed the surrender papers. That was 3 days after they walked out of the hospital and left me there. They kept the campaign running, I said, my voice rising. They kept it running after they gave me away. For 3 months, Mara said. They posted updates about your struggle while you were living in Talia's guest room. They used generic photos of hospital equipment they probably found on Google. How much? Talia asked. Her voice was like a whip crack. Mara pointed to the green bar at the top of the page. Total raised, $28,450. $28,000, I repeated. Almost $30,000. And not a dime of it went to the hospital, Mara said. Medicaid paid for your treatment. The state paid. Taxpayers paid. They pocketed nearly 30 grand of sympathy money and bought a vacation house in the Poconos. I stood up. I couldn't sit anymore. The room felt too small. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. I saw Talia's beat-up sedan parked next to a shiny BMW. I thought about Talia working double shifts. I thought about the macaroni and cheese dinners. I thought about how Talia had stressed over the cost of my braces, how she had sold her grandmother's ring to pay for my math tutor, and they, the people who shared my DNA, had stolen $30,000 using my cancer as a prop. I felt a scream building in my chest. I wanted to find them. I wanted to drive to their house and break their windows. I wanted to scream the truth until their neighbors came out to watch. I wanted to burn their lives down the way they had tried to burn mine. Ren, Talia said. I didn't turn around. I was shaking. I want to kill them. No, Talia said. She stood up and walked over to me. She didn't hug me this time. She turned me around and gripped my shoulders. Hard. Listen to me. Anger is good. Anger is fuel. But if you use it like a bomb, you blow yourself up too. If you go to them now, screaming and crying, they will call the police. They will paint you as the unstable, ungrateful child. They will win. So what do? I demanded, tears finally spilling over. Let them get away with it? No, Talia said. We do not let them get away with anything, but we do not act like victims. We act like surgeons. We cut them out, piece by piece, with precision. She pointed to the stack of papers on Mara's desk. You are going to take all of that, Talia said. You are going to organize it. You are going to build a file so thick and so undeniable that when you finally drop it, they won't just be embarrassed, they will be destroyed. I looked at the papers. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. A file, I said. A fortress, Talia corrected. The truth is armor, Ren, but you have to put it on piece by piece. You don't run into battle naked. That afternoon, we stopped at an office supply store. I bought a 3-inch binder. I bought dividers. I bought a 3-hole punch. I went home and I started working. I didn't cry anymore. I treated the paperwork like homework. I created sections. Credit fraud, medical abandonment, charity fraud. I printed the Wayback Machine screenshots. I highlighted the dates. I cross-referenced the surrender documents with the bank opening dates. I created a timeline on a spreadsheet, color-coding the lies. It was meticulous work. It was cold work. And I was good at it, as I worked. I realized something. The system, the legal system, the financial system, the medical system, was a language. My parents had used that language to exploit me because they thought I couldn't speak it. They thought I was just a child, a mute victim, but I could learn the language. I started spending my lunch periods in the school library, reading about consumer protection laws. I read about the Fair Credit Reporting Act. I read about wire fraud statutes. When it came time to choose my senior year electives and start looking at colleges, my guidance counselor, Mrs. Gable, was surprised. I thought you were dead set on biology, she said. looking at my course selection sheet. You added AP Government and a law elective? And you are looking at universities with strong medical ethics programs? I am still going to be a doctor, I told her. But I don't just want to treat patients, Mrs. Gable. I want to understand the rules. I want to know how the hospital works, how the insurance works, and how the laws protect, or fail to protect, the people in the beds. I didn't tell her the real reason. I didn't tell her that I wanted to be the kind of doctor who could spot a David and a Laura Miller from a mile away. I wanted to be the person standing at the door when a parent tried to walk out, holding the legal padlock that would stop them. I wanted to be powerful, not for the sake of power, but for the sake of protection. One night, late in my senior year, I was sitting at the kitchen table. The binder, I now thought of it with a capital B, was sitting next to me. It was heavy, packed with 3 years of evidence. We had successfully disputed the credit cards. The debt was gone from my record, but the evidence of who put it there remained in my binder. Talia walked in. She had just finished a shift. She looked at the binder, then at me. "You are going to be scary one day," she said, pouring herself a glass of water. "Is that a bad thing?" I asked. "No," she said. "The world needs scary women, especially scary women with good hearts." She sat down opposite me. "But you need to know something," Talia said. Her face was serious, the kitchen light reflecting in her dark eyes. "You are doing great. You are getting scholarships. You are going to be a doctor. You are going to be successful." "I hope so," I said. "I know so," Talia said. "And that is exactly why you need to be ready, because people like your parents, they have a sixth sense for money. They have a radar for success." She tapped the table with her finger. "Right now, you are a debt to them. You are a risk. So they stay away. But the day you walk across a stage with a medal, the day you get a title, the day you look like an asset instead of a liability." She leaned in close. "They will come back," Talia warned. "They won't come back with love. They won't come back with apologies. They will come back with a reason, a sob story, a sudden realization of their mistakes. They will try to harvest you, Ren, just like they harvested your sickness." I looked at the binder. I touched the cool plastic cover. Inside were the bank statements, the fake charity posts, the lies written in their own handwriting. "Let them come," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of the girl who had survived the lavender room. "I'm not the harvest anymore. Talia," I patted the binder. "I'm the reaper." My academic career did not begin with a burst of genius. It began with the cold, hard realization that intelligence was the only currency I had which my biological parents could not steal. Freeze, or transfer to an offshore account. If the truth was my armor, as Talia had said, then education was the sword I needed to sharpen until it could cut through steel. I treated Briarwell University not as a college experience, but as a tactical operation. While my dorm mates were rushing sororities or nursing hangovers on Sunday mornings, I was in the bioethics library, cross-referencing state statutes on medical guardianship with pediatric oncology outcomes. I took 21 credits a semester. I petitioned the dean to allow me to take organic chemistry and advanced sociology simultaneously. A combination my advisor called masochistic, but I called necessary. I wasn't just trying to be a doctor. I was trying to build a new kind of practitioner, someone who could read a blood panel and a custody agreement with equal fluency. But ambition is expensive. Halfway through my sophomore year, I came home for a weekend to do laundry and steal some of Talia's cooking. I walked into the house quietly, wanting to surprise her. I found her asleep at the kitchen table, her head resting on a stack of bills. She was still wearing her scrubs from the hospital. Her badge lay on the table next to her phone. I leaned in to wake her, but then I saw the screen of her phone. It was open to her work schedule app. She had picked up 5 extra shifts in the last 2 weeks. 5. That meant she was working 60 hours a week on her feet, lifting patients, running codes, and dealing with trauma, all while she was 52 years old. I looked at the bills under her head. They weren't her bills. One was for my textbooks. One was for the lab fees for my summer research program. One was for the car insurance on the used Honda she had bought me so I could commute to my internship. She wasn't just supporting me. She was bearing herself to build a foundation for me to stand on. I didn't wake her. I backed out of the kitchen, went to my room, and opened my laptop. I spent the next 8 hours applying for every single grant, bursary, and work-study position available in the state. I didn't care if I was qualified. I applied for the Daughters of Coal Miners grant, even though I had never seen a coal mine. I applied for the midnight librarian assistant job. I applied for a research assistant position in the ethics department that was reserved for graduate students. I got the library job. I got the research position because I annoyed the professor until he read my paper on the ethical failures of the American foster system regarding medical neglect, and I secured 3 small departmental grants. The next time I came home, I put a check on the table. It wasn't huge, $2,000, but it covered the textbooks and the insurance. "What is this?" Talia asked, eyeing the paper like it might bite her. "It is my share," I said, putting a carton of milk in the fridge. "And you are dropping those extra shifts. T, if I see you working a double again, I am quitting school to become a mime," Talia laughed. The sound tired, but genuine. She didn't argue. She knew better than to argue with me when I used my lawyer voice my junior year. I landed the internship that would define the rest of my life. It was at the Horizon Children's Institute, a long-term care facility for pediatric patients who were wards of the state. These were the kids who fell through the cracks, the ones with complex medical needs whose parents had died, been incarcerated, or like mine, had simply done the math and decided the kids were too expensive to keep. The facility smelled of industrial cleaner and desperation, masked by bright murals of cartoon animals that peeled slightly at the corners. My job was technically administrative, filing papers, updating charts, shadowing the case managers, but I spent every lunch break on the floor. That was where I met a boy named Leo. He was 6 years old, battling cystic fibrosis, and he sat by the window in the common room every single day from 3 to 5 in the afternoon. "What are you looking for?" "Leo," I asked him one day, sitting on the floor next to his wheelchair. "My dad," he said, not taking his eyes off the parking lot. "He said he was going to get a better job so he could buy me the vest that shakes my chest. He said he would come back on a Tuesday." It was Tuesday. It had been Tuesday for 6 months. I looked at Leo's chart later that afternoon. His father hadn't just left to get a job. He had moved 3 states away and started a new family. There was a do not contact order in the file. I felt that familiar burn in my chest. The same burn I felt when I looked at my own parents' debt collection letters. But this time, I didn't just feel anger, I felt clarity. I realized that medicine wasn't enough. Curing Leo's lungs wouldn't fix the hole in his life. He needed a doctor who understood that his chest pain wasn't just mucus, it was grief. He needed a system that didn't let a father promise a return he never intended to make. I started writing. I wrote a research paper titled "The Physiological Impact of Abandonment on Pediatric Recovery Rates." I used data from the Institute, stripping away the names but keeping the stories. I showed, with cold, hard numbers, that children with active family engagement recovered 20% faster than those in state care. I argued that family needed to be redefined in medical policy, that a biological parent who checked out was a health risk, and a foster parent who stayed was a medical necessity. My mentor at the Institute was Dr. Elena Sloan, a pediatric surgeon who was 5 feet tall and terrified every resident in the building. She walked fast, talked fast, and suffered no fools. "Parker," she barked at me one morning during rounds. "Stop mumbling. You have a good point about the patient's potassium levels, but you are whispering it like it is a secret. If you are right, be loud. If you are wrong, be loud, and then learn." "I'm sorry," I said, looking down. "Don't apologize." "Doctor," Sloan snapped, "correction is not an insult. It is a tool. You want to advocate for these kids? You think the insurance companies are going to listen to a mouse? You need to find your voice, Parker, and you need to make it a scalpel." She made me present my research at the weekly department meeting. The first time, I shook so hard I dropped my laser pointer. Doctor, Sloane didn't rescue me. She just waited, arms crossed, until I picked it up and started again. By the third time, I didn't shake. I looked the chief of medicine in the eye and told him that the hospital's visitation policy for foster parents was archaic and damaging to patient outcomes. "You are annoying, Parker, doctor," Sloane told me afterwards, which was the highest compliment she was capable of giving. "But you are correct." Then came the application season for medical school. The prompt for the personal statement was standard. Why do you want to be a doctor? I sat in my dorm room for 3 days, staring at the blinking cursor. The standard advice was to write something inspiring about helping people, or a childhood fascination with biology. I deleted my first 3 drafts. They felt fake. They felt like I was trying to be the person my biological parents wanted me to be. Polished, perfect, devoid of trauma. I decided to write the truth. I titled the essay, "The Anatomy of Staying." I wrote about the day my parents walked out. I didn't use adjectives to solicit pity. I described the sound of the door closing. I described the silence. And then I wrote about Talia. I wrote about the woman who wasn't related to me by blood, but who had slept in a chair for 3 weeks, so I wouldn't wake up alone. I wrote, "Biology makes a mother, but choice makes a parent." I want to be a doctor because I have seen the limitation of medicine. Chemotherapy killed the cancer in my blood, but it was the presence of a person who refused to leave that saved my life. I intend to practice medicine with the understanding that the most powerful intervention we have is not a drug, but a commitment to the patient's humanity. I hit submit. 4 months later, I was sitting in the student union, eating a bagel, when my phone buzzed. It was an email notification. Sender: Ashford School of Medicine. Subject: Admissions Decision. My hands went cold. Ashford was a reach. It was one of the top programs in the country. Known for its dual focus on clinical excellence and medical ethics, it was where the people who wrote the textbooks taught. I opened the email. "Dear Ms. Parker, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to the incoming class." I stopped breathing. I read it again. "Furthermore, the admissions committee has selected you as a recipient of the Dean's Integrity Scholarship, which covers full tuition and provides a living stipend for 4 years. Full tuition, $250,000. I didn't scream. I didn't jump on the table. I sat very still, feeling the tears slide down my face, hot and fast. I thought about the debt collection letter. I thought about the GoFundMe scam. I thought about my father's notebook, calculating the cost of my life and deciding it was too high. I was worth it. Ashford School of Medicine thought I was worth $250,000. I called Talia. She picked up on the second ring. "Is everything okay?" she asked immediately, her nurse radar pinging. "I got in," I choked out. "Ashford, full ride?" "Talia, I got the full ride." There was silence on the other end of the line. For a long moment, all I heard was the background noise of the hospital break room. "Talia?" "I am here," she said, her voice thick. I am looking at a picture of you." "Which one?" "The one from the day you came home," she said, "with the little fuzz on your head and that baggy sweater. You looked so fragile. Wren, like a strong wind would blow you away." "I'm not fragile anymore," I said. "No," she agreed. "You are iron now. You did it, baby girl. You walked through the fire and you came out gold." She didn't say I sacrificed so much for this. She didn't say you owe me. She didn't make it about her. That was the difference. That was always the difference. "You are on the right path," she said simply. "And I am going to buy the biggest frame they sell at the store for this acceptance letter." 2 weeks before graduation, I received another email. This one was from the Dean of Briarwell. I had been selected as the valedictorian. I would be giving the commencement speech. I sat in my apartment, no longer a dorm, but a small studio I paid for with my research stipends, and looked at the blank page. I knew my biological parents would be there. I knew they tracked these things. A valedictorian at a prestigious university was a trophy. A daughter going to Ashford Medical School on a full scholarship was a winning lottery ticket. They would see the success, and they would come to claim their share of the credit. They would tell their friends, "Look what we made." I could have used the speech to destroy them. I could have named them. I could have read the dates of the surrender papers and the amounts of the stolen charity money to the entire auditorium. But that felt small. That felt like revenge. I wanted something bigger. I wanted justice. I wanted to take the concept of parent away from them entirely. I wanted to redefine it so thoroughly that by the time I was finished speaking, they would realize they didn't fit the definition. I wanted to strip them of the title they had abandoned but still tried to wear. I picked up my pen. I didn't start with "Welcome parents and faculty." I started with a question: what is the price of a human life? I wrote for hours. I wrote about the economics of abandonment. I wrote about the currency of care. I wrote about the people who stay when the ledger turns red. I finished the draft at 3 a.m. I read it aloud to the empty room. My voice didn't shake. I was ready. The trap was set. But it wasn't a trap made of malice. It was a trap made of light. And when I turned it on, the shadows, my parents, would have nowhere to hide. 3 days before the ceremony, the peace I had cultivated for 4 years was shattered by a single notification ping on my laptop. I was sitting in the student center, organizing my final thesis notes. The coffee in my cup was cold. The air conditioning was humming its usual low drone. It was a Tuesday, indistinguishable from any other Tuesday, until an email from the university event coordinator, a woman named Sarah, popped up on my screen. Subject: Guest list. Inquiry/VIP. Seating request. I clicked it open, assuming it was a logistical question about the procession order or the pronunciation of my middle name. Dear Wren, I hope you're resting up for the big day. We have received a rather persistent inquiry from a Mr. and Mrs. David Miller. They contacted the alumni office and the dean's secretary, identifying themselves as your parents. They stated there was an oversight with the invitations and are requesting 2 seats in the reserved family section, preferably near the stage. Since your file lists Talia Parker as your sole emergency contact and next of kin, I wanted to verify this with you before releasing any tickets. Do you know these people? Should I issue the passes? The cursor blinked at the end of the sentence. I stared at the name David Miller. I had spent years building a firewall around my life. I had changed my legal name. I had scrubbed my social media. I had moved 3 times. I thought I was immune to them. I thought I had vaccinated myself against their influence with therapy and legal victories. But as I read that email, my heart did not just skip a beat. It slammed against my ribs with a violent, terrified rhythm. My hands, which were steady enough to perform delicate sutures in the lab, began to tremble. It was a somatic reflex, a muscle memory of fear that bypassed my brain entirely. I was not 22 years old and valedictorian in that moment. I was 13, bald, and waiting for a door to close. They had found me. And not only had they found me, but they were also trying to talk their way into the front row. I closed the laptop. I took a deep breath, counting to 4 on the inhale and 4 on the exhale. Just as Dr. Sloan had taught me before big presentations, control what you can. I whispered to the empty room. I picked up my phone and dialed Talia. She answered on the first ring, as if she had been waiting. "Hey, baby girl," she said. "Everything okay?" "They contacted the school," I said. My voice was flat. "David and Alara, they want VIP seats." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the background noise of the hospital cafeteria fade as Talia likely walked into a quiet hallway. "Did they contact you directly?" she asked. Her voice had shifted into what I called her mama bear mode. Low, protective, and dangerous. "No, just the event coordinator. Sarah is asking if she should let them in." "Tell her no," Talia said immediately. "Tell her to put their names on the security watch list. You do not need that energy on your big day. Wren, this is your moment. You earned it. They do not get to bask in light they did not help kindle." "I know," I said. I looked out the window at the campus quad, watching students toss frisbees in the sun. But if I ban them, they will make a scene outside. They will play the victims. They will tell everyone that their ungrateful daughter shut them out after they sacrificed everything for her. Let them talk, Talia said. Who cares what they say? I do, I admitted. Because if I hide from them, it feels like I am still that scared kid in the hospital room. It feels like I am running. Talia was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that changed everything. Ren, she said softly, stop thinking about what they want. Stop thinking about what the school thinks. Ask yourself this. What do you want them to see? I closed my eyes. I imagined the auditorium. I imagined the podium. I imagined looking out into the crowd and seeing Talia, beaming with pride. And then I imagined seeing David and Alara. I didn't want them to see a victim. I didn't want them to see a daughter who was hiding. I want them to see who I became without them, I said. The realization was cold and sharp like a scalpel. I want them to see that their absence didn't break me. It made me. Then let them come, Talia said. But we do it on our terms. We put them where you can see them, and we make sure they know exactly where they stand. Okay, I said. I will tell Sarah to approve the tickets. And Ren, Talia added, I will be right there. If they take one step toward you that looks aggressive, I am going to remind them that I am from the south side of Chicago before I was a nurse. I hung up, feeling a strange sense of calm. I opened the laptop and replied to Sarah. Approved. Please seat them in the front row, directly center. I want to make sure they can hear every word. After I sent the email, the researcher in me took over. I couldn't just sit and wait. I needed to know why now. Why, after 9 years of silence? Were they suddenly desperate to claim me? I opened my investigative binder, digital now, encrypted on a secure drive, and started digging. I ran a fresh credit check on David and Alara Miller. I accessed public court records. I looked at property listings. What I found was a tragedy of errors. The vacation house in the Poconos, the one bought with my stolen charity money, was gone. It had been foreclosed on 2 years ago, apparently. David had leveraged it to invest in a tech startup that turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. I kept digging. Their primary residence in Oak Creek was currently listed as a pre-foreclosure. They were 3 months behind on the mortgage. David had been let go from his firm 6 months ago for compliance violations, which was corporate speak for cutting corners. They were broke. They were drowning. And then I looked for Blair, my sister, the golden child, the one whose college fund was so sacred it required my sacrifice. I found her LinkedIn profile first. She was working as a junior marketing associate at a mid-tier firm in Chicago, but then I checked the local news archives for her name. An article from 6 months ago popped up. Charity fraud allegations rock local sorority. I read the text, my jaw tightening. Blair had been the treasurer of her sorority. She had organized a fundraiser for pediatric cancer awareness, using a story about her brave little sister who fought lymphoma. She had raised $5,000, but the money hadn't gone to charity. It had gone to a spring break trip to Cabo. When the sorority sisters found out, they expelled her. She narrowly avoided criminal charges by paying it back, likely draining whatever was left of my parents' savings, but the real twist was in the social media comments under the article. Someone had tagged Alara Miller, asking, "Is this true? Did your daughter steal?" And Alara had replied, "We are devastated. We have no contact with Blair. She has refused to speak to us since we asked her to help with the mortgage." I sat back in my chair, stunned. It was a perfect circle, a snake eating its own tail. Blair had used my cancer story to gain social currency, just like my parents had used it for financial currency. But when the money ran out, when the parents who had protected her needed help, Blair had cut them off. She had learned their lesson too well. When someone becomes a burden, you leave. My parents were alone. They were losing their home. They had been abandoned by the daughter they chose, and now they were looking at the daughter they discarded. They didn't want a reunion. They wanted a lifeboat. I saw the pattern immediately. I was graduating from a top university. I was heading to medical school on a full scholarship. I had just won a prestigious medal that came with a $25,000 grant, a fact that was publicly listed on the university website. They were coming for the money. As if summoned by my realization, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. Ren, it is Mom. We got the tickets. We are so overwhelmed with pride. We always knew you were special. Can't wait to hug you. We need to catch up. Love you. Mom. The word looked alien on the screen. She hadn't been Mom since the day she looked at the floor while I asked if I was going to die. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot. I saved it to the folder labeled Evidence. An hour later, another text came. This one from a different number. David, Ren. Great news about the medal. That is a serious honor. Does the university pay out the grant as a lump sum, or is it a tuition credit? Just curious how these things work nowadays. We should grab dinner after the ceremony. My treat. Or maybe we can just order in. There it was. The hook. He couldn't even wait until he saw me. He was already asking about the liquidity of the grant money. My treat, he said. Knowing full well his credit cards were likely maxed out, I felt a flash of anger. Hot and white. But I pushed it down. Anger was messy. I needed to be cold. I didn't block them. Blocking them would signal emotion. It would signal that I was affected. Instead, I let the messages sit there, marked as read. I wanted them to see that I saw their messages and simply chose not to engage. It was the digital equivalent of staring them down. But I wasn't just going to rely on silence. I needed a lock. I called the legal aid clinic at the law school. I had a friend there, a third-year law student named Marcus, who owed me a favor for helping him decode medical records for a malpractice case he was working on. Marcus, I said when he picked up, I need a cease and desist letter drafted, and I need a formal notice of no trespass prepared for my apartment and Talia's house. Who is the target? Marcus asked. Hearing the edge in my voice, my biological donors, I said. They are coming to graduation. I am letting them attend the ceremony. But I need to make sure they know that the second I step off that stage, they have no legal standing to approach me, contact me, or solicit funds from me. I can do that, Marcus said. I will cite the original surrender documents. I will make it clear that the termination of parental rights severed all financial and familial ties. If they ask you for $1, it will be considered harassment. Good, I said. And Marcus? Add a clause about the identity theft. Tell them that we still have the file on the fraudulent credit cards and the charity scam. Tell them that the statute of limitations hasn't run out on the wire fraud because we have proof of ongoing concealment. You want to threaten them? Marcus asked. No, I said. I want to remind them of the bomb they are sitting on. If they try to squeeze me for money, I detonate the file. Understood, Marcus said. I will have it ready by tomorrow morning. I hung up. The texts kept coming over the next 2 days. They oscillated wildly between saccharine affection and subtle guilt-tripping. Your sister asks about you all the time. It is sad the family is broken. Lie. Blair wasn't speaking to them. We made mistakes, Ren. But we were young and scared. You have to understand the pressure we were under. Revisionist history. Do you have a place to stay after graduation? You know your old room is always open. We could fix it up. A trap. They wanted me in the house to pay the mortgage. I read every single one. I didn't feel the sting of rejection anymore. I felt the clinical detachment of a pathologist looking at a slide of diseased tissue. I could see the rot. I could see the mechanism of the infection. Talia came over the night before graduation. She brought takeout Thai food and a bottle of sparkling cider. She sat on my floor while I steamed my gown. You ready? She asked, watching me iron the heavy black fabric. I think so, I said. I have the speech. I have the legal papers. I have the evidence. And the heart? Talia asked. How is the heart? I stopped ironing. I looked at the ring on my finger, the cheap silver one she had given me 8 years ago. I touched the necklace with the WT pendant. My heart is full, I said honestly, because I know who is filling it. They can't take anything from me. T, Because there is nothing left in me that belongs to them. Talia smiled, that warm, grounding smile that had pulled me through the darkest nights of chemotherapy. Then let's go get your medal, she said. I went to sleep that night with my phone on silent. I woke up at 6 in the morning on graduation day. I checked my messages one last time. There was one final text from my mother. See you soon. We are bringing flowers. Hope you remember us. I laughed out loud in the empty apartment. It was a dry, humorless sound. Oh, I remember, I whispered to the screen. And in about 3 hours, you are going to realize that I never forgot a single thing. I put the phone in my bag. I slipped the envelope Marcus had given me, the one containing the legal notices, into the inside pocket of my graduation gown, right next to my speech. I was not walking into a celebration. I was walking into a courtroom, and I was the judge. The morning before graduation was not spent in a spa or a salon. It was spent in the office of Mr. Arthur Sterling, the university's chief legal counsel. The room smelled of mahogany and old dust, a sharp contrast to the antiseptic smell of the hospitals I had grown up in. I sat in a leather chair that was slightly too big for me, my hands folded on my lap, watching Mr. Sterling review the stack of documents I had placed on his desk. Mr. Sterling was a man who spoke in statutes and liabilities. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and looked at me over the top of the file. You understand, Ms. Parker, that the university cannot technically intervene in a private family dispute, he said, his voice dry. However, given your status as a scholarship recipient and the specific nature of the harassment you have documented, we can take steps to secure the perimeter of the ceremony. I am not asking for intervention, I replied, my voice steady. I am asking for containment. I need to ensure that my legal identity is ironclad before I step onto that stage. If they try to claim relation to Wren Miller in any official capacity, press releases, social media tags, or financial claims, I need the paper trail to be absolute. Mr. Sterling nodded. He pulled a form from his drawer. We have already locked your transcript, he said. Your degree will be issued solely to Wren Parker. We have also flagged your file with the Alumni Association to prevent any data sharing with third parties. As for the credit bureaus, you said you have placed a freeze? A total freeze, I confirmed. I contacted Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion yesterday. No new lines of credit can be opened in my name without a PIN number that is currently memorized and written nowhere. I also filed a preemptive affidavit with the local precinct regarding potential identity theft, citing the previous fraudulent accounts from 3 years ago. If they try to open a credit card to pay for their plane tickets using my social security number, they will be flagged for a felony within seconds. Mr. Sterling looked at me with a mixture of concern and respect. You have prepared for a siege, Wren. I have prepared for a reality, I corrected him. These people do not see boundaries. They see opportunities. I am just removing the opportunities. I left his office feeling lighter. The administrative firewall was built. Now came the emotional one. I went back to my apartment. The small studio was quiet. The sun was streaming through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. On my desk sat the binder, the physical manifestation of my history. I opened it to the section labeled Surrender. I took the documents out one by one, laying them on the floor. First, the voluntary relinquishment of parental rights. It was dated October 28, 2015. The signatures were hasty, scrawled in blue ink. David Miller, Elara Miller. There was no hesitation in the loops of the letters. They hadn't pressed the pen down hard. They had signed it with the same casual indifference one uses to sign a receipt for a dinner they didn't enjoy. Next, the medical social work summary. I read the caseworker's notes from that day. Parents expressed concern over fiscal impact of treatment. Father inquired about state assumption of liability. Mother refused charitable resources due to social standing. Then, the crowdfunding history. I placed the screenshots of the fake charity campaign next to the surrender papers. The dates overlapped perfectly. On the same day, my father signed away his rights to be my father. He posted an update asking for $50 to help pay for our daughter's brave fight. I looked at the collage of betrayal on my floor. It wasn't sad anymore. It was just evidence. It was the raw material I needed to build the final trap. I wasn't going to scream at them. I wasn't going to cry. I was simply going to hold up a mirror so large and so clear that they would have no choice but to see the monsters they were. I heard a key turn in the lock. Talia walked in. She was carrying 2 coffees and a bag of bagels. She stopped when she saw the papers on the floor. She set the coffee down and sat on the rug beside me. She didn't try to tidy them up. She just looked at the signature on the surrender form. "I never told you about the day I signed my side of the papers," Talia said softly. I looked at her. "The adoption papers?" "No," she said. "The foster placement papers. The very first day." She traced the pattern of the rug with her finger. "Mara tried to talk me out of it," Talia admitted. "Not because she didn't trust me, but she pulled me into the hallway and said, 'Talia, look at the chart. This kid is stage 3. The parents are litigious. The medical bills are going to be a nightmare even with the state paying. And the emotional toll? If she dies on your watch, it will destroy you.'" I felt a cold chill. I had never known this. I had always assumed Talia's choice was easy, driven by her natural instinct to nurture. I hadn't realized she had been warned that I was a bad investment. "What did you say?" I asked. Talia looked at me, her dark eyes fierce. I told her that I didn't care about the chart. I told her that I saw a girl who was playing cards in the dark because she was afraid to turn on the light. And I told her that if trouble was the reason to walk away, then I should quit nursing altogether. She reached out and squeezed my hand. "They saw a liability. Wren," she said, pointing to the signatures of my biological parents. "I saw a dividend, and I was right. Look at you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "You chose me," I whispered, "even when it was hard." "Especially when it was hard," Talia corrected. "That is the only time choice matters. It is easy to be a parent when your kid is winning trophies. It is only real parenting when your kid is throwing up chemo drugs at 3 a.m. That was the key. I stood up and went to my laptop. The speech was already drafted, but it was missing the spine. I had been trying to write it as a general reflection on integrity. But after hearing Talia, I knew that was wrong. This wasn't about integrity in the abstract. It was about the specific, brutal definition of family. I highlighted the section where I thanked my parents. I hit delete. I typed, "The people who signed the papers." I highlighted the section where I talked about overcoming abandonment. I hit delete. I typed, "The difference between biology and presence." I structured the speech like a medical diagnosis. The opening, the anatomy of a crisis, the middle, the pathology of leaving, the conclusion, the cure, which was not medicine, but the act of staying. I decided then and there that I would not speak their names. Giving them names gave them humanity. I would refer to them only by their actions. They were the signatories. They were the departing. I stood in front of the full-length mirror on the back of my bathroom door. I held a hairbrush as a microphone. "I stand here today," I practiced, watching my own eyes, not because of the people who gave me life, but because of the person who saved it. My voice wavered on the word saved. "No," I told my reflection. "Stronger. Don't beg for their sympathy. Command their attention." I tried again. "I stand here today because when the ledger turned red, one person decided I was not a debt to be canceled. Better, cold, sharp. I am not a victim of abandonment," I continued, staring down the girl in the mirror. "I am a survivor of a transaction." I practiced for 2 hours. I practiced until my voice didn't shake. I practiced until the anger that had been burning in my gut for 9 years cooled into a hard, diamond-like certainty. The truth didn't need to be screamed. It didn't need tears. The facts were devastating enough on their own. Then, I made the call that would set the stage physically. I dialed Sarah, the event coordinator. "Hi, Sarah," I said. "I have a small adjustment for the seating chart." "Of course." "Wren," she chirped. "What do you need?" You know the two guests requesting VIP seats? The Millers? Yes, I have them in row 1, seats A and B. Perfect, I said. I need you to seat Talia Parker in seat C, right next to them. Sarah hesitated. Are you sure? Usually, divorced parents or complicated families prefer separation. No, I said. I want them together, and I want the rest of the row filled with the staff from the Horizon Children's Institute. Doctor. Sloan, Mara Henson, the people who actually raised me. Okay, Sarah said slowly. So, the biological parents flanked by the adoptive mother and the social workers? Exactly, I said. It is a reunion. It wasn't a reunion. It was a jury box. I was putting David and Alara Miller in a vice. To their left would be the woman who paid the bills they refused to pay. To their right would be the social worker who filed the neglect report against them. And directly in front of them, on the stage, would be the daughter they sold. They would be trapped in a cage of their own making, unable to leave without causing a scene, forced to sit shoulder to shoulder with the evidence of their failure. The night before the ceremony, the campus was buzzing with parties. Music drifted up from the quad. Laughter echoed in the hallways. I didn't go out. I sat on my bed, holding Talia's silver ring. It was scratched. It was cheap. It was the most valuable thing I owned. I took my graduation gown out of the garment bag. It was heavy, black velvet with the gold piping of the Honor Society. I slipped the ring into the deep pocket on the right side. I am not standing alone, I whispered. Every time I reached into that pocket during the speech, I would feel the metal. It would be my anchor. If I looked at David and felt small, I would touch the ring and remember the lavender room. If I looked at Alara and felt ugly, I would touch the ring and remember the day we shaved our heads. There was one last thing to do, the failsafe. I took a large manila envelope. Into it, I placed certified copies of everything, the surrender papers, the credit card fraud reports, the Wayback Machine printouts of the GoFundMe scam, and a copy of the letter from the debt collector. I sealed it with tape, on the front. I wrote, "To be opened only if David or Alara Miller contest any statement made during the commencement address." I walked across the dark campus to Dr. Sloane's office. She was working late, as always. The light from her window was a beacon in the dark brick building. I knocked. "Come in," she barked. I walked in and placed the envelope on her desk. "What is this?" she asked, eyeing it suspiciously. "Did you find a new pathology?" "No," I said. "This is my insurance policy." I explained what was in the envelope. I explained who was coming tomorrow. I explained that I was going to tell the truth, and that the truth might make people angry. Doctor. Sloane listened without interrupting. She looked at the envelope, then at me. She picked up a red marker and wrote, "Do not touch" on the seal. "I will keep it in the safe," she said. Her voice was uncharacteristically soft. "But Ren?" "Yes." "You don't need protection," she said. "You have the moral high ground. It is the only territory that matters. But if they try to come for you, if they try to sue you or slander you, I will open this envelope, and I will make sure they never work in this state again." "Thank you, doctor," I said. "Go sleep," she ordered. "You have a big day. You have to look like a doctor, not a cadaver." I walked back to my apartment. The air was cool. The stars were out. The same stars that I used to count on the hospital ceiling, wondering if anyone cared that I was alive. Tomorrow, 3,000 people would be looking at me. Tomorrow, 2 people who wanted to forget me would be forced to remember. I wasn't afraid. The fear had burned out years ago, leaving only ash and steel. I went into my bathroom and brushed my teeth. I looked at myself one last time. Minutes, not morals, I reminded myself. State the time of death. State the cause. Do not mourn. Just report. I turned off the light. The darkness was familiar now. It wasn't a place where monsters hid. It was just the place where I rested before the hunt. The heavy velvet curtain of the gymnasium stage felt cool against my arm as I waited. The hum of the audience had settled into a respectful silence, the kind of quiet that usually precedes a prayer or a verdict. Dean Thorne approached the podium. He adjusted the microphone, the feedback whine echoing for a split second before clearing. He held the envelope that contained the name everyone already knew, but the ritual required the performance. "We now come to the highest honors of the graduating class," Dean Thorne's voice boomed. Filling the cavernous space, the valedictorian is chosen for academic perfection. The Integrity and Service Medal is chosen for moral courage. It is rare, in the history of Briarwell, that both distinctions are awarded to the same student. He paused. I took a breath. I felt the silver ring in my pocket. "Please welcome," the dean continued, looking directly at the front row, "Ms. Wren Parker." The name rang out like a bell. Parker. The applause began as a ripple and quickly swelled into a roar, but I was not looking at the crowd. From my vantage point at the edge of the stage, I was looking at two specific people in the front row. My biological mother, Elara, froze. Her hands had been raised to clap, but they stopped in midair. Her mouth opened slightly, a perfect O of confusion. She turned her head sharply to look at my biological father. David's face had drained of all color. He was staring at the program in his lap, then up at the screen where my face was projected next to the name, Wren Parker. I could see the gears turning in his head. He wasn't thinking about my grades. He was thinking about the legal implication. If I was a Parker, I was not a Miller. If I was not a Miller, his claim to me, and to the $25,000 grant attached to the medal, was non-existent. I stepped out into the light. I walked to the center of the stage. My legs did not shake. My heart beat in a slow, steady rhythm. Thud, thud, thud. I shook the dean's hand. I accepted the heavy gold medal. I stood behind the podium. I waited for the applause to die down. It took a long time. When silence finally returned, I gripped the edges of the wood and leaned into the microphone. I did not look at David. I did not look at Elara. I looked past them. To seat 1C, I locked eyes with Talia. She was wearing her best suit, her chin held high, tears streaming down her face. She nodded at me once. "Go." "The first rule of medicine," I began, my voice clear and amplified, "is primum non nocere. First, do no harm." I let the Latin hang in the air. "It is a vow we take to protect the vulnerable, to prioritize the life of the patient above our own convenience." I learned this principle in medical textbooks, but I saw it practiced long before I ever entered a classroom, and I saw it violated long before I ever entered a hospital. The room was dead silent. When I was 13 years old, I was diagnosed with stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. I said. I spoke matter-of-factly, stripping the sentence of any self-pity. On October 28, 2015, in a room at Pine Haven Regional, 3 adults sat around a table to decide my future. I saw David shift in his seat. He looked like he wanted to stand up, but Dr. Sloan, sitting directly behind him, leaned forward and whispered something in his ear. He stayed seated. 2 of those adults, I continued, asked about the cost. They asked about the survival rates. They calculated the risk to their retirement accounts and their social standing. And when the math did not add up, they signed a voluntary relinquishment of parental rights form. They chose to protect their assets rather than their child. A gasp rippled through the audience. It started in the front rows and moved back like a wave. "They walked out of the room," I said, "and they never looked back. That is the anatomy of harm." I paused. I took a sip of water. I could see Elara now. She was gripping her purse so hard her knuckles were white. She was looking around, terrified that people knew who I was talking about, but she couldn't leave. Leaving would be an admission. "But there was a 3rd adult in the room," I said, and my voice softened, filling with warmth. "A nurse, a woman who was working a double shift, a woman who had no obligation to me, no blood relation, and no financial incentive. She looked at a sick, bald, terrified teenager, and she did not see a liability. She saw a human being." I looked directly at Talia. I pointed to her. "Her name is Talia Parker," I announced. And she is my mother. The audience followed my finger. 3,000 heads turned toward the front row. Talia stood up, shyly at first, and then with strength. The applause that followed was different from the polite clapping earlier. This was a thunderclap. It was visceral. People stood up. Students cheered. The faculty on stage applauded. And there, in the middle of the standing ovation, sat David and Alara Miller. They were the only two people sitting. They were islands of shame in a sea of celebration. They shrank into their seats, trying to make themselves invisible, but the spotlight of the truth was too bright. I waited for the room to settle. I wasn't done. Talia taught me that family is not a noun, I said. It is a verb. It is an action. It is the act of staying when it is hard. I took a breath. Now came the scalpel. But I also learned that silence is dangerous, I said, my voice hardening. For years, I believed that if I kept my head down and worked hard, the past would stay in the past. I was wrong, because while I was fighting cancer, and while Talia was working overtime to pay for my books, my identity was being used by the very people who abandoned me. I saw David flinch as if he had been slapped. I discovered that while I was a ward of the state, credit cards were opened in my name. I told the crowd. I discovered that a crowdfunding campaign was launched, using my photo and my diagnosis, raising nearly $30,000 from kind strangers, money that was meant for a sick child but was used to buy a vacation home. The gasp this time was not of shock. It was of outrage. I heard murmurs, stolen, fraud. I do not tell you this to ask for sympathy, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. I tell you this because I am entering a profession where trust is everything, and I want to be clear about where my integrity comes from. It comes from surviving the lack of it. I looked down at the front row. David was staring at his shoes. Alara was weeping. But I knew. They were tears of embarrassment, not remorse. So, I said, addressing the room but speaking to them. To the people who signed the papers and left, thank you. Alara looked up, startled. Thank you for leaving, I said, because if you had stayed, I would have been raised to value money over people. If you had stayed, I would never have met the woman who taught me how to love. Your absence was the greatest gift you ever gave me. I stepped back from the podium. Thank you. Class of 2022. I walked off the stage. The sound was deafening. It felt like the roof was going to lift off the building. I didn't go back to my seat. I walked down the stairs, straight to the front row. Talia met me at the railing. We hugged. A fierce, crushing embrace that felt like victory. You did it, she whispered in my ear. You really did it. Over Talia's shoulder. I saw them. David and Alara had stood up. They looked small. They looked stripped. The carefully constructed facade of the successful, grieving parents had been dismantled in 10 minutes. David tried to step toward me. He put on a smile that was a grotesque imitation of fatherly pride. Ren, he said, his voice straining to be heard over the noise. That was quite a speech. We should talk. There are things you don't understand. He reached out a hand to touch my arm. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I simply looked at his hand until he dropped it. Mr. Miller, I said. I didn't call him Dad. There is nothing to talk about. Now, honey, Alara interjected, wiping her mascara-stained cheeks. Don't be like that. We are your parents. We drove all this way. We just want to celebrate you. And maybe we can help you manage that grant money. You are young. You don't know how to handle finances. There it was, the money. Even after being publicly eviscerated, the greed was a reflex they couldn't control. I reached into the pocket of my gown. I pulled out the white envelope Marcus had prepared, the notice of no trespass, the cease and desist. I pressed it into David's hand. I am not young, I said coldly. I am 22. I am a Parker. And I am represented by counsel. David looked at the envelope. What is this? He asked. It is a legal notification, I said. It states that any further contact with me or Talia will be considered harassment. It also contains a copy of the police report filed regarding the identity theft and wire fraud. If you attempt to contact me again, for any reason, I will press charges. The statute of limitations has not expired due to concealment. David's face went gray. He knew the law. He knew I had him. You wouldn't, Ilara whispered. We are family. No, I said, turning to put my arm around Talia. This is family. You are just the defendants. I turned my back on them. Let's go home, Mom, I said to Talia. We walked out of the gymnasium, surrounded by Doctor, Sloane, Mara, and the friends I had made, a phalanx of protection. Behind us, I saw security guards gently guiding David and Ilara toward the side exit. They didn't argue, they just vanished. That evening, back at the bungalow, the house was quiet. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a warm, peaceful exhaustion. We were sitting at the kitchen table, eating pizza. The heavy gold medal was hanging on the refrigerator door, held up by a magnet shaped like a cat. I have one more thing, I said to Talia. I pulled the second envelope from my bag, the one I had sealed with the "Do Not Touch" warning, though I hadn't needed to use the bad evidence inside, but next to it was a blue envelope I had been saving. What is this? Talia asked. Open it, I said. She tore it open. She pulled out a letter on thick, creamy stationery. Dear Doctor, Parker, pending. We are pleased to confirm your acceptance into the Pediatric Oncology Fellowship at Northwell Children's Cancer Center. Talia gasped. Northwell? That is the best program in the country. Keep reading, I said. Furthermore, in honor of your Integrity Medal, the university has agreed to cede the initial funding for your proposed project, the Talia Parker Foundation for Abandoned Youth. Talia stopped reading. She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears again. A foundation? She whispered. It is a legal advocacy fund, I explained. It pays for lawyers for kids in the foster system who have medical needs. It stops parents from walking away without paying, and it helps foster parents like you with the bills. Named after me? She asked. Who else? I smiled. You are the one who did the work. I just took the notes. Talia laughed. A wet, happy sound. She reached across the table and took my hand. You really balanced the ledger, didn't you? She said. I looked at the ring on my finger. I thought about the lavender room. I thought about the 13-year-old girl who thought her life was over, and the 22-year-old woman who was just beginning. I didn't do it for revenge. I said softly. Revenge is for people who are still hurt. I'm not hurt anymore. I just wanted to put the truth back where it belongs. I squeezed her hand. And now, I said, I think I am ready to be a doctor. Thank you so much for listening to this story about Ren's journey from abandonment to justice. If you enjoyed seeing the truth finally come to light, please take a moment to subscribe to the Monica Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it. Also, drop a comment down below, telling us where you are listening from. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts on Ren's victory.